The rain in this city never felt like ordinary water. It felt like cold, heavy liquid grief pouring down continuously from a dark sky that had completely forgotten the color of the sun. Leo stood silently beneath the rusted iron awning of the old deserted train station, his hands buried deep inside the pockets of his dark, rain-soaked winter coat. His fingers were pressed tightly against the freezing, metallic edges of the ancient artifact concealed inside his inner vest, known to him as the chronogrip. It was a heavy, circular relic of forgotten design, its dark surface etched with intricate, non-human runes that throbbed with a faint, almost imperceptible heat against his chest. To any ordinary person passing by, it would look like nothing more than a piece of ancient, rusted junk found in a historical ruin. But to Leo, it was a beautiful, terrifying curse. It was the heavy anchor that chained his soul to an endless loop of absolute agony, a cosmic machine that traded pieces of his very life force for another 100 days of borrowed time. He pulled his thick coat collar up against the freezing wind, his eyes fixed entirely on the glowing red dial of the clock tower across the wet street. The digital numbers shifted with an agonizing, rhythmic precision. It was precisely 9:45 in the evening on the 100th day of this current timeline. In less than 15 minutes, the entire cycle would reach its terrifying, bloody climax. Leo closed his eyes, and in the deep darkness behind his eyelids, he could see them all with perfect, haunting clarity. He saw the first time she died, crushed beneath the twisted iron frame of a runaway delivery truck on a slippery road. He saw the second time, when a sudden structural failure at the university laboratory brought 3 entire floors of concrete crashing down upon her small, fragile frame. He saw the third, the fourth, the fifth, all the way to the 8th timeline. 8 distinct realities. 8 different variations of the exact same horrific ending. Every single time, the universe found a clever way to tear her away from him. It did not matter if he locked her inside a reinforced subterranean bunker. It did not matter if he took her out of the city entirely weeks in advance. And it did not matter if he stood directly in front of her like a human shield. The moment Iris confessed her true love to him, a cruel, invisible countdown was triggered in the very fabric of reality. Exactly 24 hours after those beautiful words left her lips, the universe would violently correct itself by taking her life in a horrific accident. And every single time, Leo would kneel in the blood-stained mud, pull out the forbidden relic, and tear his own biological lifespan apart to reverse the clock back by 100 days, desperately believing that the next time would somehow be different. A soft, familiar splashing sound broke through the rhythmic drumming of the storm. Leo opened his eyes, his heart instantly seizing with a familiar, suffocating panic that made it hard to draw breath. Walking through the thick curtain of heavy rain, holding a transparent umbrella that beautifully reflected the chaotic gold and violet neon signs of the street, was Iris. She was wearing her favorite cream-colored knitted scarf, the one her mother had made for her before the sickness took her away. Her dark hair was damp at the edges, perfectly framing a pale, beautiful face that carried an expression of absolute, terrifying determination. She caught sight of him standing alone under the dark awning, and a bright, radiant smile broke across her face, a smile that felt completely out of place in a world this dark and uncaring. Leo felt a sharp, burning sensation in the back of his throat, a grim physical reminder of the heavy toll the relic was taking on his young body. He had relived these exact 100 days 9 times already. 900 days of watching the same movies, listening to the exact same classroom lectures, and pretending to be surprised by the same daily jokes. His mind was a fractured archive of long conversations that never technically happened in the current world, and his physical body was rapidly beginning to fail him. If he looked closely in a mirror, he could see thin, silvery white threads spreading through his dark hair, and his left hand had developed a permanent, slight tremor that no amount of willpower could suppress. The relic did not turn back his biological clock. It only rewrote the physical world around him, leaving his aging, exhausted soul to carry the crushing weight of nearly 3 years of concentrated trauma. Iris stepped completely under the iron awning, shaking the water off her transparent umbrella with a quick, cheerful motion. She looked up at him, her bright green eyes searching his face with that deep, intuitive curiosity that always made him feel completely transparent, as if she could see right through his walls. She adjusted her scarf and took a step closer to him, her presence instantly radiating a warmth that he had missed so desperately during the lonely hours of his silent vigil. "Why do you always look at me like you are mourning someone who is standing right in front of you, Leo?" she asked softly, her voice carrying a gentle, melodic quality that cut cleanly through the thunderous roar of the passing city traffic. You have been doing that for the past week. Every single time I look up from my books, you are staring at me like you expect me to vanish into thin air right before your eyes. Leo forced his lips into a practiced, defensive smile, though the emotional effort felt like pulling against heavy iron wires. You are simply imagining things, Iris. I am just incredibly tired lately. The midterm exams have been absolutely brutal this semester, and this miserable weather isn't exactly helping my mood. Iris did not drop her intense gaze. She stepped even closer, closing the remaining distance between them until Leo could smell the faint, comforting scent of lavender soap and wet wool that always accompanied her everywhere. She reached out with a slow, hesitant movement, her small, warm fingers gently brushing against the side of his right hand. The moment her skin touched his, a violent jolt of emotional electricity shot straight up his arm. He wanted nothing more than to grab her hand, to pull her into his arms and hold her so tightly that the cruel universe could never tear them apart again. But he forced his muscles to remain perfectly still, a cold statue of absolute restraint. "I know exactly when you are lying to me, Leo," she whispered, her expression softening into something incredibly tender, yet profoundly dangerous for her survival. "We have known each other for less than a year in this school, but sometimes, when we are sitting quietly in the library or walking by the river at dusk, I get this strange, overwhelming feeling deep inside my chest. It is like my heart remembers your face from a place long before this life. It is like I have loved you for 1,000 years in another world, and no matter how hard you try to push me away with your cold words, my soul just keeps running back to yours." "Stop it, Iris," Leo said, his voice dropping into a sharp, desperate whisper as he felt the cold sweat breaking out across his neck. "Don't say things like that tonight." "No, I am completely tired of waiting and hiding my feelings," she said, her voice rising slightly with a beautiful, tragic bravery that made Leo want to scream in absolute terror. The red digital clock on the distant tower shifted to 9:58. The final 2 minutes of the timeline were ticking away rapidly. "I brought you out to this old station tonight because I simply could not keep it inside my heart anymore. I don't care about the pouring rain, and I don't care if it sounds completely crazy to you. Leo, I love you. I have loved you since the very moment I saw you sitting entirely alone in the university courtyard, looking like the loneliest person in the entire world. I want to be with you, no matter what happens." The words hung heavily in the damp night air like a sharp, invisible executioner's axe suspended by a thin thread. The moment those words left her lips, Leo felt the physical world around him shift in a subtle, terrifying way. The low, ambient hum of the city's massive power grid seemed to drop in frequency. The air became thick, heavily charged with an unnatural, high-voltage static that made the hairs on his arms stand up instantly. The hidden rune on the chrono grip against his chest flared with a sudden, vicious heat, deeply scorching his skin beneath his shirt. It was officially done. The forbidden confession had been spoken aloud. The invisible gears of universal fate had just clicked into place with absolute finality, and the terrifying 24-hour countdown had begun. Leo stood frozen in place, his breath hitching painfully in his chest as he looked down at her radiant, hopeful face. She was waiting for his response, her eyes wide and full of an innocent, beautiful vulnerability. She had absolutely no idea that she had just signed her own death warrant for the 9th time in a row. She had no idea that the man standing before her was a ghost from 9 aborted timelines, a desperate traveler who had watched her red blood wash down the dirty city drains 8 times before. "I need to go away from here immediately," Leo managed to choke out, his voice sounding completely hollow, like cold air scraping through an empty lead pipe. He stepped back roughly, tearing his hand away from her warm, gentle touch. "Leo," Iris called out, her beautiful smile instantly faltering, replaced by a deep, crushing confusion that broke his heart. "What is wrong with you? Did I say something bad to upset you? Why are you looking at me with so much fear in your eyes? Please, Iris, just turn around and go straight home right now," Leo said, turning his back to her as he began to walk blindly into the pouring rain, his heavy boots splashing violently through the dark, neon-lit puddles. "Stay inside your room tomorrow. Do not leave your house under any circumstances. Do not open the door for anyone at all. Just promise me you will stay safely inside your house." He did not wait to hear her reply, or see the tears forming in her green eyes. He ran. He ran through the blinding downpour, his lungs burning with the freezing air, his mind screaming in a chaotic mix of intense rage and absolute helplessness. He knew deep down that it was completely useless to try physical traps. In the fifth loop, he had locked her inside a windowless basement apartment, chained the iron doors from the outside, and sat against the frame with a loaded weapon for 24 hours. At exactly 9:58 the next evening, an undetected gas leak in the main line deep beneath the street triggered a massive, localized explosion that incinerated the entire residential building within seconds. The universe did not care about human logistics, it only cared about the final result. It would manipulate probability, break the laws of physics, and twist reality into knots just to ensure that Iris died exactly 24 hours after declaring her love. The next 24 hours were a slow, agonizing descent into a living hell for Leo. He did not sleep for a single second. He sat silently on the floor of his cramped, messy apartment, the blinds tightly drawn, staring blankly at the mechanical watch on his trembling wrist. He had spent the entire morning tracking her exact location, using a hidden GPS beacon. He had secretly slipped into her school bag during the third loop. The tracker showed she was at home. She had not left her room all day long. Her text messages to his phone were filled with deep hurt, intense confusion, and sorrow, asking him why he had run away into the rain, asking him if he secretly hated her. He left every single message completely on read, his heart breaking into a million silent pieces with every sharp vibration of his phone. By 9 o'clock the following evening, the atmospheric pressure in the city had dropped significantly, creating an ominous weight in the air. A massive, freak thunderstorm had rolled violently over the urban skyline, turning the night into an oppressive landscape of continuous lightning flashes and deafening thunderclaps. Leo stood outside her apartment building, hidden deeply in the dark shadow of an alleyway directly across the street. He was soaked to the skin, his teeth chattering uncontrollably from a combination of the freezing cold rain and pure, unadulterated terror. The clock on his phone showed 9:40 in the evening. Less than 20 minutes remained before the final strike of fate. He scanned the dark street frantically, looking for any potential danger. The road was completely empty due to the severe weather warning issued by the city. There were no cars, no pedestrians, and no obvious signs of an impending disaster. The building itself was a solid, modern brick structure with highly updated fire safety systems. He had personally disabled the main gas lines to her specific sector of the block earlier that afternoon under the guise of an emergency maintenance worker. He had systematically eliminated every single physical variable he could possibly think of. 9:50 in the evening. Only 10 minutes left. Suddenly, the overhead streetlights began to flicker erratically, their low hum rising into a high-pitched, metallic shriek that echoed through the empty avenue. A sudden, violent gust of wind tore down the concrete street, ripping a massive, heavy iron advertising billboard completely off the roof of the commercial complex next to her building. The massive iron structure twisted violently in the air, its sharp, jagged edges catching the storm wind like a sail as it plummeted with immense speed toward the street below. At that exact microsecond, the heavy front door of the apartment building swung open. Leo's heart stopped beating. Iris stepped out onto the wet concrete porch, holding a small plastic bag of medicine tightly in her hand. Her elderly neighbor upstairs had suffered a sudden, severe asthma attack due to the storm, and Iris, with her endless, unkillable kindness, had immediately volunteered to run to the 24-hour pharmacy on the corner to fetch an emergency inhaler. The universe had found its perfect crack in the wall. It had used her own pure, loving heart as the ultimate bait to pull her out into the open air at the exact necessary second. Iris, Leo screamed with a voice that was completely torn, lunging out of the dark alleyway as his heavy boots skidded wildly on the wet, slippery asphalt of the road. "Look up above you. Get back inside the building right now." Iris turned her head quickly toward the frantic sound of his voice, her green eyes widening in pure shock as she saw him sprinting toward her through the dark curtain of heavy rain. "Leo, what on earth are you doing here in this storm?" She did not look up at the sky. She did not see the 2-ton mass of twisted iron frame and shattered glass falling through the dark clouds directly above her head. Leo threw his entire body forward with a desperate leap, his muscles straining far past their absolute physical limits, his hand outstretched to grasp the wet fabric of her cream-colored scarf. He was only 5 feet away from her. 4 feet. 3 feet. A deafening, catastrophic crash echoed through the empty street, instantly followed by a massive spray of blinding white sparks and heavy concrete dust that filled the damp air with the sharp smell of burnt ozone and pulverized stone. The force of the impact was so incredibly violent that the resulting shockwave knocked Leo completely off his feet, sending his body rolling roughly across the wet pavement. his face scraping painfully against the rough asphalt. For a long, terrifying moment, there was absolutely no sound in the world except the frantic drumming of the rain and the low, dangerous hiss of severed electrical wires dancing wildly on the dark road. Leo scrambled to his knees with immense difficulty, his vision blurred by blood and water, his chest heaving violently as he crawled on all fours toward the twisted pile of iron ruins that now completely blocked the entrance of the building. "No, please God, no," he whimpered like a broken child, his bleeding hands tearing frantically at the heavy, sharp metal edges, completely ignoring the deep, painful cuts opening up across his palms and fingers. "Iris, can you hear me? Iris, please answer me." He pulled away a jagged section of the broken metal frame, and his breath died completely in his throat. There she lay beneath the ruins. The beautiful cream-colored scarf was completely ruined, stained a deep, dark, and irreversible crimson color. Her transparent umbrella lay shattered a few feet away on the concrete, its plastic ribs snapped like broken bones. Her green eyes were wide open, looking up at the dark, stormy sky, but the brilliant, radiant light that usually filled them was rapidly fading into a dull, cold glassiness. Leo collapsed completely beside her, gathering her fragile, broken body into his shaking arms, pulling her close against his chest as he wept openly, his hot tears mixing with the cold rain that washed over her pale cheeks. He held her limp hand tightly, feeling the rapid, terrifying drop in her body temperature. "Leo," she whispered, her voice barely a faint thread of sound, a small puff of white mist against the freezing night air. "Why do you look so incredibly sad right now? Did I do something wrong to make you cry?" "No, you did absolutely nothing wrong," Leo sobbed heavily, his forehead resting gently against hers, his entire body shaking violently with a grief that felt large enough to crush the entire world into dust. "It is me. It is all my fault. I wasn't fast enough to clear the path. I couldn't save you from this nightmare." Iris reached up with a final, trembling effort, her bloody fingers leaving a faint, smear of red along his jawline as she looked at him one last time. "Why does it feel so much like I have lost you before?" she breathed softly, her small hand suddenly losing all its remaining strength, dropping lifelessly to the wet concrete floor. Her green eyes rolled back slowly, her chest settling into a final, absolute stillness. She was gone. For the 9th time in his life, she had died tragically in his arms. A cold, hollow numbness washed over Leo, completely replacing the frantic panic with a dark, calculated rage against the universe and fate itself. He reached deep inside his wet coat, his bleeding fingers gripping the ancient chronogrip relic with a death grip. He pulled it out into the open air, holding it directly over her lifeless chest. The silver runes on the circular device were pulsing rapidly now, glowing with a deep, angry violet light that seemed to draw the very ambient light out of the street around them. He pressed his thumb down onto the central mechanical node of the relic, twisting the heavy brass dial backward with a violent, desperate force. The moment the internal mechanism clicked, a sudden, terrifying voice echoed not in the empty street, but directly inside the complex architecture of his mind. The voice was incredibly cold, ancient, and completely devoid of any human emotion, sounding like the heavy grinding of tectonic plates and the ticking of a billion mechanical clocks at the end of time. Warning, the ancient entity within the relic resonated deeply, its immense force causing Leo's vision to flash with brilliant streaks of white static. 9 complete cycles have been executed. Your biological vessel has reached its absolute structural threshold. The temporal toll for a 10th reset will require 80% of your remaining natural lifespan. If you choose to initiate this sequence, your physical body will break, your remaining time on Earth will be severely limited, and this will be your absolute final loop. There will be no more chances after this. If she dies again in the next 100 days, her soul will be permanently deleted from the grand record of time forever. Do you accept this ultimate toll? Leo looked down at the dark crimson stain on her cream scarf. He looked at her silent, beautiful face that would never see tomorrow. He gritted his teeth so hard that a sharp crack echoed in his jaw, dark blood trickling from his gums. "I accept the terms," Leo roared into the empty, uncaring night sky with every ounce of strength left in his lungs. "Reset the entire world right now. Give me back my 100 days." The relic responded instantly with a violent, explosive discharge of pure temporal energy. A massive sphere of absolute blinding white light burst from the center of the device, expanding outward at supersonic speed until it swallowed the entire street, the apartment building, the dark sky, and the entire city within a fraction of a second. Suddenly, the physical laws of the universe broke down completely. The rain stopped moving mid-air, the individual droplets freezing into perfect crystalline spheres before slowly beginning to rise backward into the dark sky. The twisted iron billboard lifted off the ground, its shattered pieces reassembling themselves perfectly as it flew cleanly backward up to the roof of the commercial complex. The crimson stains on Iris's scarf began to fade away into nothingness, the blood flowing backward into her pale skin as her body detached smoothly from his arms, moving in a reverse animation back toward the inside of the building porch. Leo felt a sharp, catastrophic agony rip through his entire physical being. It felt as though an invisible hand had reached deep inside his chest and physically torn away huge, massive chunks of his vital life force. His heart stuttered violently, his lungs collapsing as a wave of intense, blinding heat traveled up his spine. The dark hairs at his temples turned to stark, snowy white instantly, and deep, faint lines of physical exhaustion etched themselves permanently around his eyes. His vision in his left eye narrowed down into a dark, blurry fog, the optical nerve permanently damaged by the high-frequency temporal feedback of the machine. He was being completely torn apart, his very soul being ground into dust to pay the cosmic price for a 10th chance at saving her. The world around him turned into a chaotic vortex of spinning colors, reversed sounds, and temporal static, rushing backward through days, weeks, and months at an unimaginable speed. The seasons changed in a blur of light and shadow, the snow melting and returning, the autumn leaves flying back onto the branches, the sun rising in the west and setting in the east. He pulled away a jagged section of the broken metal frame, and his breath died completely in his throat. There she lay beneath the ruins. The beautiful cream-colored scarf was completely ruined, stained a deep, dark, and irreversible crimson color. Her transparent umbrella lay shattered a few feet away on the concrete, its plastic ribs snapped like broken bones. Her green eyes were wide open, looking up at the dark, stormy sky, but the brilliant, radiant light that usually filled them was rapidly fading into a dull, cold glassiness. Leo collapsed completely beside her, gathering her fragile, broken body into his shaking arms, pulling her close against his chest as he wept openly, his hot tears mixing with the cold rain that washed over her pale cheeks. He held her limp hand tightly, feeling the rapid, terrifying drop in her body temperature. "Leo," she whispered, her voice barely a faint thread of sound, a small puff of white mist against the freezing night air. "Why do you look so incredibly sad right now? Did I do something wrong to make you cry?" "No, you did absolutely nothing wrong," Leo sobbed heavily, his forehead resting gently against hers, his entire body shaking violently with a grief that felt large enough to crush the entire world into dust. "It is me. It is all my fault. I wasn't fast enough to clear the path. I couldn't save you from this nightmare." Iris reached up with a final, trembling effort, her bloody fingers leaving a faint, smear of red along his jawline as she looked at him one last time. "Why does it feel so much like I have lost you before?" she breathed softly, her small hand suddenly losing all its remaining strength, dropping lifelessly to the wet concrete floor. Her green eyes rolled back slowly, her chest settling into a final, absolute stillness. She was gone. For the 9th time in his life, she had died tragically in his arms. A cold, hollow numbness washed over Leo, completely replacing the frantic panic with a dark, calculated rage against the universe and fate itself. He reached deep inside his wet coat, his bleeding fingers gripping the ancient chronogrip relic with a death grip. He pulled it out into the open air, holding it directly over her lifeless chest. The silver runes on the circular device were pulsing rapidly now, glowing with a deep, angry violet light that seemed to draw the very ambient light out of the street around them. He pressed his thumb down onto the central mechanical node of the relic, twisting the heavy brass dial backward with a violent, desperate force. The moment the internal mechanism clicked, a sudden, terrifying voice echoed not in the empty street, but directly inside the complex architecture of his mind. The voice was incredibly cold, ancient, and completely devoid of any human emotion, sounding like the heavy grinding of tectonic plates and the ticking of a billion mechanical clocks at the end of time. Warning, the ancient entity within the relic resonated deeply, its immense force causing Leo's vision to flash with brilliant streaks of white static. 9 complete cycles have been executed. Your biological vessel has reached its absolute structural threshold. The temporal toll for a 10th reset will require 80% of your remaining natural lifespan. If you choose to initiate this sequence, your physical body will break, your remaining time on Earth will be severely limited, and this will be your absolute final loop. There will be no more chances after this. If she dies again in the next 100 days, her soul will be permanently deleted from the grand record of time forever. Do you accept this ultimate toll? Leo looked down at the dark crimson stain on her cream scarf. He looked at her silent, beautiful face that would never see tomorrow. He gritted his teeth so hard that a sharp crack echoed in his jaw, dark blood trickling from his gums. I accept the terms, Leo roared into the empty, uncaring night sky with every ounce of strength left in his lungs. Reset the entire world right now. Give me back my 100 days. The relic responded instantly with a violent, explosive discharge of pure temporal energy. A massive sphere of absolute blinding white light burst from the center of the device, expanding outward at supersonic speed until it swallowed the entire street, the apartment building, the dark sky, and the entire city within a fraction of a second. Suddenly, the physical laws of the universe broke down completely. The rain stopped moving midair, the individual droplets freezing into perfect crystalline spheres before slowly beginning to rise backward into the dark sky. The twisted iron billboard lifted off the ground, its shattered pieces reassembling themselves perfectly as it flew cleanly backward up to the roof of the commercial complex. The crimson stains on Iris's scarf began to fade away into nothingness, the blood flowing backward into her pale skin as her body detached smoothly from his arms, moving in a reverse animation back toward the inside of the building porch. Leo felt a sharp, catastrophic agony rip through his entire physical being. It felt as though an invisible hand had reached deep inside his chest and physically torn away huge, massive chunks of his vital life force. His heart stuttered violently, his lungs collapsing as a wave of intense, blinding heat traveled up his spine. The dark hairs at his temples turned a stark, snowy white instantly, and deep, faint lines of physical exhaustion etched themselves permanently around his eyes. His vision in his left eye narrowed down into a dark, blurry fog, the optical nerve permanently damaged by the high-frequency temporal feedback of the machine. He was being completely torn apart, his very soul being ground into dust to pay the cosmic price for a 10th chance at saving her. The world around him turned into a chaotic vortex of spinning colors, reversed sounds, and temporal static, rushing backward through days, weeks, and months at an unimaginable speed. The seasons changed in a blur of light and shadow, the snow melting and returning, the autumn leaves flying back onto the branches, the sun rising in the west and setting in the east. The iron gates of the university campus loomed ahead like the entrance to a familiar, beautiful prison. The morning sun was exceptionally bright today, pouring brilliant golden light over the ancient brick archways and the neatly trimmed green lawns. White and pink cherry blossom petals drifted lazily through the crisp morning air, dancing in the gentle spring breeze before settling softly on the concrete pathways. To any ordinary student walking through those gates, it was a picture-perfect morning, a fresh start to a promising new semester filled with hope, laughter, and endless possibilities. But to Leo, every single petal that drifted past his face felt like a heavy drop of lead. The vibrant brightness of the world around him was nothing more than a cruel, mocking illusion. It was the ultimate irony of his existence that the loop always began on the most beautiful day of the year, a day completely untainted by the horrific shadows of the future. Leo walked with slow, deliberate steps, his boots dragging slightly against the pavement. Every single movement required a conscious effort of will, as if his limbs were encased in heavy, invisible layers of iron fluid. The catastrophic toll of the 10th reset was vibrating violently through his entire nervous system. A dull, constant ache throbbed deeply within his bones, and a faint taste of copper and iron lingered persistently at the back of his dry throat. His heart beat with an erratic, fluttering rhythm, a fragile organ struggling to pump life through a body that had just surrendered 80% of its natural lifespan to the uncaring mechanisms of the cosmic clock. The dark, blurry fog in his left eye had settled in permanently, reducing his field of vision on that side to a shadowy vignette. He kept his dark wool cap pulled down low over his brow, completely hiding the brilliant silver-white streaks of hair that now framed his temples like premature age lines. In his right pocket, his hand trembled with a sharp, continuous twitch that he could only mask by burying it deeply into the thick fabric of his heavy black coat. He knew this specific day by heart. He had lived through this exact morning 9 times before, and every single detail was permanently burned into the fractured architecture of his memory. He knew that the student council members would be standing near the main fountain, handing out colorful orientation pamphlets with practiced, enthusiastic smiles. He knew that the old professor from the history department would trip slightly over the uneven pavement near the library stairs at exactly 8:15. He knew that the vending machine near the science building would malfunction, swallowing the coins of an annoyed sophomore. He was a man walking through a scripted play, surrounded by hundreds of unwitting actors who believed they were making genuine, spontaneous choices. The sheer psychological weight of it was suffocating. He was entirely alone in a crowded world, a solitary ghost carrying the memories of 9 destroyed timelines, walking among people who had absolutely no idea that they had already died and been reborn 9 times over. As he approached the central courtyard, Leo slowed his pace, his single clear eye scanning the vibrant crowd of students gathering near the notice boards. His heart suddenly leaped into his throat, striking his ribs with a painful, suffocating force. There she was, standing near the grand stone fountain, bathed in the warm morning sunlight, was Iris. She was laughing gaily, her bright green eyes crinkling at the corners as she conversed with a group of classmates. She was wearing a simple denim jacket over a white dress, and her dark, silky hair caught the golden rays of the sun, radiating a soft, healthy glow. There was no ruined, blood-stained cream scarf around her neck. There were no jagged wounds across her face, and no terrifying, lifeless glassiness in her eyes. She was alive. She was completely safe, whole, and radiantly happy. A sudden, overwhelming wave of profound relief crashed over Leo, so intense that it made his knees buckle slightly. He had to stop and lean heavily against a concrete pillar, his chest heaving as he fought back a sudden rush of hot tears. To see her breathing, to hear the distant, musical sound of her laughter echoing across the open courtyard, it was the grandest reward he could ever ask for. The agonizing pain in his bones, the loss of his lifespan, the blurry darkness in his eye, all of it faded into insignificance at the simple sight of her living presence. The sacrifice had been worth it. The 10th loop had successfully granted him another chance to keep her heart beating. But the relief was instantaneously swallowed by a dark, freezing wave of reality. He remembered the strict, unyielding law of the curse. The universe did not care about his joy. The timer was paused, but it was not broken. The countdown to her horrific execution was waiting in the shadows, silently biding its time until the moment she confessed her love to him. On this exact day, in every single one of the previous 9 loops, Leo would walk up to her at the notice board. They would lock eyes, he would make a polite comment about the chaotic crowd, she would smile, and their beautiful, tragic friendship would officially begin. It was a perfect, natural bond that always accelerated into deep affection, no matter how much he tried to alter the minor details later on. The emotional gravity between their souls was too strong to be managed by half measures. If he allowed the spark to ignite today, the flame would eventually consume her life just as it had 8 times before. He could not afford to be her friend. He could not afford to be the kind, mysterious boy who comforted her when she was lonely. To save her life, he had to completely extinguish the spark before it even had a chance to flicker. Leo straightened his back, his jaw clenching tightly as he forced his facial muscles into a cold, completely expressionless mask. He smoothed down the front of his dark coat, buried his trembling left hand deep inside his pocket, and stepped out from the shadow of the pillar. He began to walk directly across the courtyard, intentionally steering his path toward the grand notice board where she was standing. Iris turned her head casually to watch a passing group of students, and her gaze accidentally locked onto Leo's approaching figure. For a fraction of a second, a strange, subtle flicker passed through her green eyes, a momentary look of profound recognition, as if her soul had experienced a sudden, ghostly echo from the previous timelines. Her laughter ceased, and she stared at him with a puzzled, curious expression as he closed the distance. Despite the fact that they had never officially met in this current version of reality, the invisible bond between them seemed to call out to her, drawing her attention toward him like a magnetic force. "Excuse me," she said softly, stepping away from her friends and moving directly into Leo's path, her voice carrying that exact gentle, melodic quality that had haunted his dreams for nearly 3 years. Her green eyes searched his pale, drawn face with an innocent, open curiosity. "I am sorry to bother you, but you look like you are searching for the main lecture hall. Are you a first-year student too? The crowd here is completely crazy, but I think the science block is just past that grove of trees over there." Leo stopped dead in his tracks, standing exactly 3 feet away from her. The proximity was intoxicating. He could smell the faint, comforting scent of lavender soap that always surrounded her. Every single protective instinct inside his soul screamed at him to smile, to extend his hand, to introduce himself with the warm, gentle tone he had used 9 times before. He wanted to hear her say her name, to watch her eyes light up with that beautiful, familiar warmth that had been his only solace in a dark world. But he looked down at her small, fragile neck, and in his mind's eye, he saw the deep, terrifying crimson stain spreading across her cream-colored scarf. He saw her lifeless body resting on the cold, wet concrete porch in the pouring rain. The imagery acted like a bucket of freezing ice water poured over his emotions. His single clear eye hardened into a cold, flinty stone. He looked directly at her, his face completely devoid of any human warmth, his expression as unyielding and distant as a frozen winter landscape. "I didn't ask for your help," Leo said, his voice dropping into a sharp, curt, and thoroughly dismissive tone that sounded completely alien, even to his own ears. "And I certainly don't need a stranger telling me where to go." Iris flinched, as if she had been physically struck across the face. The bright, open warmth in her expression vanished instantly, replaced by a sudden, profound shock. Her lips parted slightly, and a faint flush of embarrassment colored her pale cheeks as she looked at him, completely stunned by the sheer, unprovoked hostility of his response. The friends she had been talking to fell completely silent, staring at Leo with a mixture of anger and disbelief. I am sorry," Iris stammered, her voice wavering slightly as her confidence crumbled beneath his icy glare. She instinctively stepped back, her fingers clutching tightly at the strap of her bag. "I was just trying to be polite. You looked a bit lost, that's all." "Then keep your politeness to yourself," Leo snapped back, stepping forward and intentionally brushing past her shoulder with a rough, aggressive movement that forced her to step aside on the pathway. "I don't have time to waste on annoying distractions. Stay out of my way." He did not look back. He kept his eyes fixed strictly on the stone archway of the main humanities building ahead, his boots striking the ground with a heavy, rhythmic thud. But inside his chest, his heart felt like it was being systematically shredded by 1,000 rusted razor blades. The image of her shocked, deeply hurt expression was branded into his retinas. He had seen her cry many times before, but those tears had always been caused by the cruel hand of fate, by physical pain, or by the terror of impending death. This was the very first time he had been the direct, intentional cause of her sorrow. It was a disgusting, sickening feeling that made him want to drop to his knees and beg for her forgiveness. But he forced himself to keep walking, his teeth gritted so hard that his jaw ached painfully beneath his skin. He entered the cool, shadowed hallway of the humanities building, the heavy air providing a brief respite from the bright, mocking sunlight of the courtyard. The corridor was bustling with students rushing toward their respective classrooms, their voices echoing loudly against the high concrete ceilings. Leo navigated the familiar hallway with an automated precision, his steps guiding him toward the large, tiered lecture hall at the end of the western wing. This was the location of their primary introductory class, a grand historical literature lecture that they shared 3 times a week. In every previous loop, Leo would arrive early, select 2 prime seats in the middle row near the window, and casually save the spot next to him for Iris when she arrived. It had been their sacred, quiet space, a place where they whispered jokes during boring presentations and shared notes under the desk. Today, everything would be entirely different. Leo pushed open the heavy wooden doors of the lecture hall and scanned the empty rows of wooden desks. The room was largely vacant, with only a few early students scattered near the front podium. He walked past the middle rows without a single glance, ignoring the familiar, sunlit desks near the window where he had spent hundreds of happy hours in past lifetimes. Instead, he climbed the concrete stairs all the way to the very back of the hall, selecting an isolated, shadow-drenched seat in the absolute highest corner of the room, far away from everyone else. He slid into the hard wooden chair, pulled his dark cap even lower over his face, and leaned his head back against the cold brick wall. He closed his clear eye, allowing the heavy silence of the corner to wrap around him like a protective shroud. His left hand was twitching violently now, the tremor aggravated by the emotional stress of his interaction with Iris. He brought his right hand over to grip his left wrist, squeezing with all his remaining strength until the skin turned white, physically forcing the muscles to remain still. A few minutes later, the heavy wooden doors at the bottom of the hall creaked open, and a loud wave of chatter flooded the room as the main body of students began to arrive. Leo opened his single clear eye, his gaze automatically dropping to the entrance. Walking into the room alongside a few girls from the courtyard was Iris. She was still looking somewhat subdued, the bright, radiant energy she had possessed earlier noticeably dampened by their unpleasant encounter. She walked down the central aisle, her green eyes scanning the rows of desks with a hesitant, searching expression. Leo watched her from his high, shadowed vantage point, his breath catching in his throat. He saw her gaze linger for a long moment on the middle rows near the window, the exact spot they had occupied in 9 previous lifetimes. A subtle, confused frown creaked across her brow as she stared at the empty seats, as if some deep, subconscious part of her mind was actively wondering why those specific desks felt so profoundly empty, as if someone important was supposed to be sitting there waiting for her. But the feeling passed, and she shook her head slightly to clear the thought before turning to follow her new companions down toward the front of the room, selecting a seat in the second row, far away from the dark corner where Leo sat hidden in the shadows. The old professor stepped up to the podium, clearing his throat loudly to signal the beginning of the lecture. He began to speak, his dry, monotonous voice droning on about the classical structures of ancient epic tragedies. Leo didn't listen to a single word. He already knew the entire lecture by heart. He could predict every slide change, every joke the professor would attempt to make, and every question that would be asked by the overeager students in the front row. Instead, he kept his single clear eye fixed entirely on the back of Iris's head. He watched the way the morning light from the front windows caught the edges of her dark hair, the way she tilted her head slightly when she was concentrated, and the way her small hand moved diligently across the pages of her notebook as she took notes. She was so close, yet she was an absolute universe away. By his own deliberate choice, he had transformed himself from her closest confidant into a hostile stranger, an unpleasant memory from a bad morning. The sheer loneliness of his position began to settle over him like a suffocating, freezing weight. In the previous loops, this hour had been filled with a beautiful, silent companionship, the soft rustle of paper between them, the warmth of her shoulder brushing against his, the gentle, reassuring smiles she would throw his way whenever he looked stressed. Now there was nothing but a cold, empty void. He was a sentinel standing watch over a girl who would never know the magnitude of his sacrifice, a dying boy enduring the slow, agonizing destruction of his own body and soul, just to ensure that she could continue to take notes in a university classroom. As the lecture progressed, Leo felt a sharp, sudden pang of agony rip through his chest, followed by a tight, suffocating restriction in his lungs. He quickly brought his hand to his mouth, stifling a sudden, violent cough before it could echo through the quiet hall. He pulled his hand away and looked down in the dim light of the back corner. A small, dark smear of fresh crimson blood coated the center of his palm. The relic's toll was progressing with a terrifying, unrelenting speed. His physical container was decaying from the inside out, the temporal energy systematically eating away at his vital organs to maintain the fabric of the reset world. He didn't have much time left. He certainly wouldn't survive another reset, even if he wanted to. This 100 days was all he had left of his existence. If he failed to break the curse during this timeline, there would be no 9th or 10th chance. She would die, her soul would be permanently erased from the grand record of reality, and he would fade into the dark void as a complete failure. The hour finally drew to a close, and the loud, chaotic sound of rustling papers and moving chairs signaled the end of the class. Students began to filter out of the rows, laughing and talking as they headed toward the exits. Leo remained perfectly still in his dark corner, waiting patiently for the room to completely empty out so he wouldn't have to risk another close encounter. Iris gathered her books, slinging her bag over her shoulder as she stood up from her desk. As she walked toward the central aisle to leave, she paused for a brief second, her green eyes instinctively turning upward toward the highest rows at the back of the hall. She looked directly toward the dark corner where Leo sat. Her expression was a complex mixture of lingering hurt, quiet curiosity, and an unexplainable, deep-seated confusion. She stared at his solitary, shadowed figure for a few long seconds, as if she were desperately trying to decipher the mysterious, aggressive stranger who had broken her warmth earlier that morning. Leo did not break eye contact. He stared back down at her with the exact same cold, unyielding, and emotionless expression he had worn in the courtyard, refusing to allow a single flicker of his internal agony to show through his eyes. He remained a perfect, unfeeling statue of ice. Iris finally bit her lower lip, turning her head away with a sharp, resolute movement, and walked quickly through the heavy wooden doors, vanishing completely into the bustling crowd of the outer hallway. The moment the doors clicked shut behind her, Leo let out a long, shuddering breath, his shoulders collapsing completely as the rigid posture of control shattered into pieces. He leaned forward, burying his face in his hands as a violent tremor shook his entire frame. The first day was only halfway over, and he had already inflicted a deep wound upon the person he loved most in the universe. He had 99 more days to go, 99 more days of wearing the mask of the monster, of driving her away, and of watching her life from the cold, lonely shadows of a dying timeline. He reached inside his vest, his trembling fingers brushing against the cold, silent metal of the chronogrip relic. The path was set, and the cost was paid. He would walk through the flames of this self-inflicted hell until the very end, keeping her safe from the curse of his love, even if it meant he had to die completely forgotten by the only girl he had ever lived to save. The passing of time in a reset world was a strange, disjointed experience that only a ghost could truly understand. Within less than a week, the brilliant golden sunshine of the first morning had vanished, replaced by a low, oppressive canopy of gray clouds that hung over the university campus like a thick wool blanket. The vibrant cherry blossoms that had danced so beautifully in the fresh spring breeze were now bruised and battered, torn from their branches by a sudden, icy midnight wind and trampled into the damp, dark concrete of the campus pathways. For Leo, the days did not move forward in a straight line. They felt like a heavy, suffocating swamp that he had to drag his decaying body through every single morning. The calendar on his wall claimed that a week had passed since the final reset, but to the exhausting weight inside his soul, it felt like an eternity of continuous, unyielding punishment. Every single morning began with the exact same physical reminders of his mortality. Leo would stand in front of the small bathroom mirror, watching the pale light of dawn filter through the dust-covered blinds, and count the new silver threads appearing at his temples. The white hair was spreading rapidly now, no longer confined to a few stray strands but forming thick, icy streaks that contrasted sharply against the dark remnants of his youth. His left eye had lost almost all its clarity, leaving him to navigate the world through a fractured, watery twilight on that side of his face. The tremor in his left hand had traveled upward into his forearm, a persistent, electric twitching that throbbed in time with the hidden relic against his chest. He spent his nights sitting upright on the floor, his back pressed against the cold brick wall of his apartment, clutching his leather-bound notebook with white-knuckled desperation. He spent those sleepless hours reading and rereading his own analog pencil notes from the previous 9 lifetimes, memorizing the exact dates, times, and locations of every disaster, transforming his mind into a cold, clinical tactical map of survival. By the 9th day of the loop, the social landscape of the university had settled into a routine that Leo had carefully, brutally engineered. In the classrooms and hallways, he had successfully established himself as an absolute pariah. He walked through the crowded corridors like a localized winter storm, his gaze fixed entirely on the floor ahead, his shoulders tense, and his face frozen into an uninviting, hostile glare that actively repelled anyone who dared to look his way. If a classmate tried to offer a polite greeting, he would respond with a harsh, cutting silence or a sharp, dismissive remark that left them stunned and insulted. Within a matter of days, the whispers had begun. People talked about the strange, aggressive boy in the back row who looked like a corpse and spoke like a monster. They warned each other to stay far away from him, branding him as a dangerous, unstable eccentric who wasn't worth the trouble. Leo heard every single whisper, and every single rumor felt like a comforting shield, a heavy iron wall that he was building between his cursed existence and the innocent world around him. But the true test of his resolve came on a damp, rainy Thursday afternoon inside the Central University Library. The library was a massive, multi-tiered structure filled with towering oak bookshelves that stretched toward a vaulted glass ceiling. The air inside was thick with the comforting, heavy scent of old paper, polished wood, and leather bindings, illuminated by the soft, warm glow of green-shaded desk lamps. It was a place that Leo had loved deeply in his past lives. In almost every previous loop, this library had been their sanctuary. He and Iris would spend hours hidden away in the deep, quiet alcoves of the history section, sharing a single pair of headphones to listen to music, whispering quiet jokes that drew annoyed glares from the elderly librarian, and studying together until the facility lights flickered to signal closing time. It was the place where they had grown closest, a quiet haven where the chaotic noise of the outer world faded into nothingness. Leo sat alone at a long wooden table in the absolute furthest corner of the 3rd floor, surrounded by heavy, technical volumes on ancient architectural design that he had absolutely no interest in reading. He was using the massive books as a physical barrier, hiding his pale face and his trembling left arm from the few students scattered across the room. The rhythmic, soothing sound of the rain drumming against the vast glass ceiling overhead was the only noise breaking the heavy silence. He closed his clear eye, trying to suppress the sharp, burning ache in his lungs that had been growing steadily worse since noon. He could feel the chrono grip relic throbbing against his ribs, its hidden warmth serving as a constant, mechanical reminder that his remaining days on Earth were ticking away like grains of sand through a broken hourglass. A sudden, soft shadow fell across the wooden surface of his table. Leo opened his eye, his muscles instantly tightening into defensive knots as a familiar, suffocating panic seized his chest. Standing on the opposite side of the table, holding a stack of neatly organized reference books against her chest, was Iris. She was wearing a simple, dark green oversized sweater that made her look incredibly small and fragile, and her dark hair was gathered into a loose, damp clip at the back of her head. Her face was pale, her green eyes wide and filled with a profound, stubborn determination that Leo recognized instantly. It was the exact same look she wore whenever she was trying to solve a seemingly impossible calculus problem, or whenever she refused to give up on a broken piece of machinery. She had spent the last 9 days observing him from a distance, watching him systematically destroy his reputation and push the entire world away, and it was clear that her stubborn, compassionate soul had finally reached its absolute limit. "May I sit down here, Leo?" she asked softly, her voice dropping into a quiet, tentative whisper that barely carried across the empty table. She didn't wait for his permission. She carefully set her books down on the polished wood and pulled out the heavy wooden chair, sliding into it with a quiet, graceful motion that shattered his carefully constructed isolation into pieces. Leo did not move a single muscle. He remained perfectly still, his face instantly locking into the cold, expressionless mask of stone that he had practiced so diligently in front of his bathroom mirror. He did not look directly into her eyes. Instead, he fixed his gaze on the small, silver ring she wore on her right index finger, a cheap piece of costume jewelry that he knew she had bought at a street market during her early teenage years. "I thought I made myself perfectly clear in the courtyard last week, Iris," Leo said, his voice dropping into a low, cutting monotone that sounded entirely devoid of any human emotion. "I told you to stay away from me. I don't remember giving you permission to sit at my table, nor am I interested in whatever tedious conversation you are trying to force upon me." Iris flinched slightly at the sharp delivery of his words, a faint shadow of hurt passing over her face, but she did not back down. She leaned forward slightly, her small hands resting flat against the surface of the table, her green eyes locked onto his pale features with a terrifyingly intense focus that made him feel completely exposed. "I don't care about your permissions, Leo," she whispered back, her voice shaking slightly with a mixture of fear and stubborn resolve. "And I don't believe a single word that comes out of your mouth. I have been watching you for the past week. I see the way you talk to people, the way you intentionally snap at anyone who tries to be kind to you, and the way you hide yourself in the dark corners of every single room. You are trying so hard to make everyone on this campus hate you. You are wearing this ridiculous, cruel mask like a shield. But I know it is a lie." Leo felt a cold sweat break out across the back of his neck, his heart hammering against his ribs like a trapped animal. He tightened his grip on his left wrist beneath the table, physically forcing his trembling hand to remain still as he leaned forward, narrowing his single clear eye into a cold, contemptuous glare. "You know absolutely nothing about me, Iris," he sneered, injecting a heavy dose of cruel, artificial arrogance into his tone. "You are an incredibly naive girl who reads far too many romantic stories. You see a lonely boy in a dark coat, and your ridiculous savior complex immediately kicks in. You think you have discovered some deep, tragic secret, don't you? You think you are special enough to look past my attitude and save the lonely soul. Let me disabuse you of that pathetic delusion right now. I am not wearing a mask. I am simply a thoroughly unpleasant person who finds the superficial, cheerful chatter of people like you to be completely repulsive." Iris did not tear her gaze away, even as his cruel words sliced through her defenses. She reached out, her small fingers stopping just an inch away from his sleeve, as if she were desperately wanting to touch his hand, but was too afraid of the cold rejection that would follow. "Then explain to me why you look like you are dying inside every time you look at me, Leo," she demanded, her voice rising slightly in pitch, filled with a beautiful, heartbreaking sorrow that made Leo's internal world completely fracture. "Explain to me why, on the very first day of class, before we had ever spoken a single word to each other, you ran toward me in the courtyard looking like your entire world had just collapsed. Explain why you know my name when I had never introduced myself to you." Explain why, whenever I am near you, I get this terrifying, overwhelming feeling that I am supposed to know you, that I have stood beside you in the rain, and that you have held me before. My mind doesn't know who you are, Leo, but my heart is screaming that you are someone incredibly important to me. You can't lie to me about that. I feel it every single time you look into my eyes. The revelation hit Leo like a physical blow to the solar plexus. A cold, suffocating dread washed over his entire being. The cosmic reset was supposed to be absolute. It was supposed to rewrite the physical brain, erasing every single synapse and memory associated with the unwritten timelines. But the human soul was apparently a far more complex, resilient structure than the ancient creators of the chronogrip had anticipated. 9 lifetimes of deep, unconditional love, 9 lifetimes of shared joy, shared sorrow, and tragic deaths had left a ghostly, indelible imprint upon the very fabric of her spirit. Her heart was remembering the echoes of his sacrifice. If she continued down this path, if she allowed these ghostly memories to take root, she would inevitably fall in love with him all over again. The spark would ignite, the confession would be spoken, and the universe would violently step in to murder her for the 10th and final time. He had to destroy the echo. He had to tear down the ghostly structure of her love with a cruelty so absolute that her heart would be permanently scarred against him. He had to kill the lingering affection in her spirit, even if the act of doing so completely destroyed his own remaining humanity. Leo slowly leaned back in his chair, a low, cruel chuckle escaping his lips, a sound that sounded completely hollow and metallic. He pulled off his dark wool cap, deliberately exposing the stark, snowy white streaks of hair at his temples to the harsh light of the green desk lamp. He saw her eyes widen in sudden shock at the sight of his premature aging, but he did not give her a single second to process the detail. "Do you want to know the truth, Iris?" he said, his voice dropping into a chilling, venomous whisper that seemed to freeze the very air between them. "Fine. I will tell you exactly why I know your name, and why I looked at you that way. During the orientation week, I happened to come across your student profile left open on the administrator's desk in the main hall. I saw your picture, I saw your pathetic family history, and I saw how your mother passed away when you were just a child, leaving you entirely alone in the world with nothing but a cheap silver ring and a mountain of medical debts to your name." Iris froze, the color completely draining from her face, her green eyes diluting with a sudden, sharp spike of profound agony as he casually weaponized her deepest personal trauma against her. "I saw a girl who was desperately lonely," Leo continued, his clear eye fixed on her breaking features, his internal voice screaming in absolute, agonizing horror at the words he was forcing himself to speak. "I saw a perfect, vulnerable target. I thought to myself that it would be incredibly easy to play the role of the mysterious, broken boy, to draw you in, and to use your desperate need for affection to entertain myself for a semester. That's why I ran toward you on the first day. It was an act. It was a calculated opening move to get your attention. But when I actually stood close to you, when I smelled that cheap, sickening lavender soap you wear, and heard your superficial, cheerful chatter, I realized something. You aren't an interesting puzzle, Iris. You are just a thoroughly boring, pathetic, and suffocatingly needy girl who clings to anyone who shows her the slightest bit of attention. The moment you opened your mouth, I realized that playing with you wouldn't even be worth the immense boredom it would cause me." "Stop it," Iris whispered, a single, heavy tear finally breaking free from her eyelid and tracing a slow, shimmering path down her pale cheek. "Please, Leo, stop saying this." "So I decided to drop the act entirely," Leo said, his voice rising in cold intensity, ruthlessly driving the final iron nail into the coffin of their friendship. "I decided that driving you away with honesty was far more efficient than pretending to care about your petty little life. Those strange feelings you have, that overwhelming sense of familiarity, it isn't destiny, Iris. It is just your own desperate, pathetic loneliness playing tricks on your mind. You are so starved for love, so broken by the loss of your mother, that you are projecting a grand, tragic romance onto a complete stranger who looked at you for a few seconds. It is honestly disgusting to witness. So do us both a massive favor. Take your cheap books, take your pathetic savior complex, and get out of my sight. If you ever try to approach me, speak to me, or look at me like that again, I will make sure everyone on this campus knows exactly how desperate and unstable you truly are." Iris sat perfectly still for 3 long, agonizing seconds, her entire frame trembling as his cruel, calculated venom systematically dismantled the final remnants of her warmth. The green eyes that had always looked at him with so much beautiful, unconditional trust were now completely shattered, filled with a deep, dark, and absolute ocean of pure, unadulterated hurt and betrayal. The ghostly echoes of her heart had been thoroughly crushed, replaced by a sudden, violent realization that the boy she thought she knew was nothing more than a malicious, heartless monster. A quiet, broken sob escaped her lips. She stood up from the table so quickly that her wooden chair shrieked loudly against the floor, drawing the immediate, angry attention of the surrounding students. She didn't bother to gather her reference books. She turned around and ran, her heavy boots clattering wildly against the wooden stairs as she sprinted away from his corner, her face buried in her hands as she wept openly, her small form vanishing completely into the shadows of the lower tiers. The moment the distant sound of the library's heavy front doors echoing shut reached his ears, Leo's rigid posture collapsed completely. A sudden, catastrophic wave of physical agony ripped through his chest, so intense that it felt as though his lungs were being physically crushed by a massive iron vice. He lunged forward, slamming his forehead against the hard wooden surface of the table as a violent, uncontrollable fit of coughing seized his entire body. He clutched his chest with both hands, his fingernails tearing through the fabric of his dark coat as he fought desperately for a single breath of air. He pulled his hands away from his mouth and looked down. A thick, dark pool of fresh crimson blood was splattered across the polished wood of the table, staining the pages of the open architectural textbook beneath him. The hidden chronogrip relic against his ribs was burning with a terrifying, continuous heat, the silver runes glowing so intensely through his vest that he could see the violet light reflecting off the dark pool of blood on the desk. The temporal toll was accelerating violently. The extreme emotional trauma of the interaction had triggered a massive destabilization in his already decaying physical vessel. He was actively dying, his body giving up its vital resources at double the normal rate just to maintain the absolute reality of the 10th loop. Leo didn't care about the blood. He didn't care about the burning pain in his chest or the darkness creeping into the edges of his remaining vision. He slowly reached out with his trembling right hand, his bleeding fingers gently tracing the smooth wooden surface of the chair where Iris had sat just moments before. He could still feel the faint, lingering warmth of her presence on the wood. He could still smell the microscopic traces of her lavender soap in the damp air around the table. He had done it. He had achieved absolute, tactical success. He had looked into the eyes of the girl he loved more than life itself, the girl he had torn his own soul apart to save 9 times over, and he had completely shattered her spirit. He had planted a deep, unyielding root of pure hatred and disgust inside her heart. She would never approach him again. She would never look at him with warmth. She would never sit beside him in the library, and she would absolutely never confess her love to him in this timeline. The curse had been successfully circumvented. Her life was officially safe from the countdown of fate. But as he sat alone in the dark, silent corner of the library, the dark crimson blood dripping slowly from the edge of the table onto his boots, Leo realized the true, terrifying magnitude of the hell he had created for himself. He had saved her life, but in doing so, he had become the monster that she would despise until her very last breath. He would spend his remaining few days on Earth watching her live her life from the dark, freezing shadows of an absolute isolation, completely forgotten, utterly reviled, and profoundly alone. He pulled his dark wool cap back over his white-streaked hair, wiped the blood from his lips with the sleeve of his coat, and slowly stood up from the table. He walked out into the cold, pouring rain of the evening, his trembling hand buried deep inside his pocket, clutching the silent metal relic that had granted him his wish. The villain's mask was officially locked onto his face, and he would wear it proudly through the flames of his self-inflicted execution, knowing that her survival was the only beautiful thing left in a world that had completely forgotten his name. By the arrival of the 50th day of the final loop, the city had completely transformed into a cold, monochrome landscape of endless fog and biting autumn winds. The vibrant greens of the university campus had thoroughly faded, replaced by dead, brittle brown leaves that scratched loudly against the concrete as the gale swept them across the empty quadrangles. Leo sat on the cold stone steps of the abandoned chemistry annex, his body huddled deep within the protective layers of his dark winter coat. The physical toll of the 10th reset was no longer a silent, hidden decay. It had become an aggressive, visible parasite that was rapidly consuming the final remnants of his youth. More than half of his hair had now turned a stark, snowy white, looking like premature winter frost against his pale, hollow temples. His left eye was completely shrouded in a heavy, milky darkness, forcing him to view the world through a single, strained right eye that burned with constant fatigue. The tremor in his arm had worsened significantly, requiring him to keep his left hand buried deep within his pocket, tightly gripping the heavy brass frame of the chronogrip relic just to steady his entire upper body. He pulled his analog notebook from his inner pocket with a slow, deliberate movement that sent a sharp spike of arthritic pain shooting through his knuckles. He opened the worn leather cover, his single clear eye focusing on the charcoal pencil marks that detailed the events of the fourth timeline. He didn't need the notes to remember, but the clinical precision of the text was the only thing that kept his fracturing mind grounded in reality. According to his calculations, the true danger of the loop was about to manifest. Even though he had successfully broken Iris's heart in the library, ensuring that she would never confess her love to him, the universe was not a passive entity. It was an active, aggressive system of probability. In the fourth timeline, even without a confession, a series of bizarre, highly coordinated physical accidents had targeted Iris around the middle of the 100 days, as if the fabric of fate was actively testing his defenses, trying to force a situation that would bring them back together. Leo looked up from his notebook, his gaze tracking across the distant courtyard toward the main entrance of the Student Union building. Through the shifting curtains of gray fog, he spotted her. Iris was walking alongside a group of her new classmates, carrying a heavy stack of chemistry textbooks in her arms. She was laughing at something a tall boy next to her had said, but the laughter felt different now. It was a guarded, careful happiness. Over the past 40 days, Leo had watched her rebuild her life from the absolute foundation of the hatred he had planted in her soul. She had completely stopped looking toward the empty window seats in the lecture halls. She no longer lingered in the history aisles of the library. Whenever their paths accidentally crossed in the narrow corridors of the humanities building, she would instantly stiffen, her bright green eyes freezing into twin pinpricks of pure, unadulterated disgust and fear as she quickly averted her gaze and stepped as far away from him as physically possible. The sight of her hatred was a brutal, continuous execution for Leo's soul, but it was also his greatest masterpiece. Her disgust was the heavy iron armor that kept her alive. As long as she viewed him as a malicious, unstable monster, she would stay safe from the curse of his presence. But looking at her now, seeing the complete absence of the beautiful, unconditional trust that had defined their past 9 lifetimes, Leo felt an absolute, crushing loneliness that seemed larger than the dark city itself. He was her phantom guardian, a dying boy who was systematically destroying his own existence to protect a girl who would gladly watch him vanish into the shadows. He clutched his chest as a sudden, familiar tightness restricted his lungs, forcing back a violent cough that tasted heavily of copper and old blood. He wiped his lips with the dark fabric of his sleeve, his single eye narrowing as he focused entirely on the digital clock tower across the campus. The time was precisely 3 o'clock in the afternoon. The script of the fourth timeline was about to begin its deadly sequence. In that previous reality, at exactly 3:14 p.m. on the 52nd day, a massive commercial freight truck carrying heavy industrial steel pipes had suffered a catastrophic brake failure while descending the steep hill of the Western Avenue. The heavy vehicle had roared through the red light at the campus intersection, plowing directly into the pedestrian crosswalk at the exact moment Iris was stepping off the curb after her chemistry laboratory class. In that timeline, Leo had been walking beside her. He had managed to violently push her out of the way, taking the absolute brunt of the impact himself, which had forced him to use his first desperate reset to save his own shattered body. Today was the 52nd day. The weather conditions were identical. The class schedules were exactly the same. The universe was resetting its traps, preparing to execute the physical sequence that would take her life, regardless of whether she loved him or not. Leo stood up from the stone steps, his joints popping with a dry, hollow sound that made him wince. He slipped his notebook back into his coat and began to walk toward the western intersection, his boots striking the damp pavement with a slow, heavy rhythm. He didn't plan on saving her by running into the street this time. His body was far too weak, his reflexes slowed by the decay of his nervous system. If he attempted to physically shield her, his fragile bones would instantly shatter beneath the weight of the vehicle, and he would die right there on the asphalt, leaving no one to protect her for the remaining 48 days of the loop. He had to use a different strategy. He had to intercept her before she ever reached the curb, and he had to do it in a way that would reinforce her absolute hatred for him. He reached the edge of the Western Avenue at exactly 3:12 p.m. The gray fog was exceptionally thick here, rolling off the nearby river and swallowing the bottom of the street lamps in a ghostly white mist. The traffic on the main road was steady but cautious, the tires of the cars producing a continuous, wet hissing sound as they rolled over the slick, rain-soaked asphalt. Leo positioned himself near the shadow of a large brick utility shed, about 30 yards away from the main pedestrian crossing. He pulled his wool cap down low, his single clear eye tracking the sidewalk that led from the science laboratory building. At 3:13 p.m., the heavy glass doors of the science building swung open, and a crowd of exhausted students filtered out into the cold afternoon air. Iris was among them, walking entirely alone this time, her head bowed against the freezing wind as she tightly hugged her heavy chemistry textbooks against her chest. She was wearing her dark green sweater, her face pale and focused on the concrete pathway ahead of her. She was moving at a brisk pace, completely unaware that less than 60 seconds remained before a 2-ton mass of out-of-control steel would scream through the intersection ahead. Leo stepped out from the shadow of the utility shed, placing himself directly in the center of the narrow sidewalk, completely blocking her path. Iris did not notice him until she was less than 10 feet away. When she finally raised her head and recognized the pale, white-streaked figure standing before her, she stopped dead in her tracks. The casual focus on her face vanished instantly, replaced by a violent, defensive tension. Her green eyes widened with a mixture of intense anger and deep, instinctual fear. She gripped her textbooks tighter, her knuckles turning white as she took a deliberate step backward, her gaze darting toward the open lawn to her left as if she were calculating an escape route to avoid him entirely. "What are you doing here, Leo?" she demanded, her voice shaking with a sharp, defensive edge that cut through the whistling wind. Her tone was completely devoid of the gentle melody he had loved for 3 years. It was a weapon meant to keep a dangerous predator at bay. "Leave me alone. I am warning you, if you take one step closer to me, I will scream for the campus security guards. I have absolutely nothing to say to you." Leo did not move. He stood perfectly still, his single clear eye boring into her face with a cold, contemptuous intensity that masked the absolute agony tearing through his heart. He forced his lips into a cruel, arrogant sneer, his voice dropping into that familiar, venomous monotone that he had used to destroy her spirit in the library. "Do you honestly think the entire world revolves around your pathetic schedule, Iris?" Leo sneered, stepping forward just enough to force her to take another defensive step back. "I don't care about your warnings, and I certainly didn't come here to speak to your boring self. I happen to be walking to the administrative wing, and you are currently blocking the only dry pathway on this miserable campus. Then move out of my way." Iris snapped back, her eyes flashing with a sudden, brilliant heat born of pure frustration and lingering hurt. Her chest heaved against her green sweater as she stared at his pale, ruined face. "You are a disgusting, pathetic monster, Leo. You sit in the dark like a corpse, tracking my movements, and then you have the absolute audacity to pretend it's a coincidence. I hate you. Do you hear me? I absolutely despise the very sight of your face. You ruined the only good thing I had this semester, and you continue to stalk me like a lunatic. Just get out of my life and die alone somewhere." The words "just get out of my life and die alone somewhere" echoed through the architecture of Leo's mind with the weight of a physical sledgehammer. It was exactly what he wanted to hear, the absolute confirmation of his success. Yet the raw, emotional reality of hearing those words from her lips felt like a hot iron rod being pushed directly into his chest. He wanted to drop the act. He wanted to drop to his knees, wrap his arms around her waist, and bury his face in her dark hair, begging her to remember the timelines where they had loved each other. But he looked past her shoulder, his single eye catching a sudden, chaotic movement at the top of the western hill. At exactly 3:14 p.m., a massive, dark blue commercial freight truck emerged from the upper thicket of fog, descending the steep hill at a terrifying, unnatural speed. The high-pitched, metallic shriek of its useless brakes echoed across the avenue, followed by the frantic, continuous blaring of its air horn. The heavy vehicle was swerving violently across the slick road, its tires losing all traction as the weight of the massive industrial steel pipes in the back pushed it downward like a runaway locomotive. Iris heard the sudden, deafening roar of the air horn and instinctively began to turn her head toward the street to see what was happening. Before her eyes could lock onto the danger, Leo lunged forward with a sudden, violent burst of physical movement. He grabbed the thick fabric of her denim jacket with his right hand, forcefully twisting his body to swing her around, throwing her away from the edge of the sidewalk and sending her crashing heavily onto the soft, muddy grass of the campus lawn. The heavy chemistry textbooks slipped from her grip, scattering across the wet concrete like broken tiles. "Leo, what are you doing?" Iris screamed in absolute terror and fury, her body skidding across the damp grass as she looked up at him with eyes that fully expected him to physically assault her. A microsecond later, a catastrophic sound shattered the afternoon air. The massive blue freight truck screamed through the red light at the intersection, its heavy metal tires mounting the concrete curb at the exact spot where Iris would have been standing had she continued walking down the path. The massive vehicle swerved violently, the sheer momentum causing the heavy iron chains holding the cargo to snap with a series of explosive metallic cracks. 3 massive, solid industrial steel pipes, each weighing nearly a ton, broke free from the truck bed, tumbling off the side of the vehicle and crashing onto the sidewalk with a deafening, earth-shaking thud that pulverized the solid concrete into a spray of sharp gravel and gray dust. The runaway truck continued its destructive path, slamming into a thick concrete utility pole 50 yards down the road, finally coming to a devastating halt in a massive cloud of hissing steam and white smoke. For a long, terrifying moment, the entire intersection fell into a dead, oppressive silence, broken only by the low hiss of the truck's ruptured radiator and the distant, frantic shouting of nearby onlookers who had witnessed the near-fatal disaster. Iris sat frozen on the damp grass, her breath completely caught in her throat, her body shaking violently from the sheer adrenaline of the near-death experience. She stared blankly at the massive steel pipes that now rested directly over the pulverized section of the sidewalk where she had been walking just seconds before. The metal was scraped and dented, covered in a thin layer of wet concrete dust. If she had taken just 2 more steps down that path, if she hadn't been stopped by Leo, her small, fragile body would have been instantly crushed beneath those 3 tons of unyielding iron. She had been saved by a fraction of a second. She slowly turned her head back toward Leo, her green eyes wide and dilated with a sudden, profound confusion that began to tear through her fear. The defensive anger had vanished, replaced by a shocking, overwhelming realization. The boy she believed to be a heartless monster had just thrown her out of the path of a literal avalanche. He had saved her life. Leo was kneeling on the concrete a few feet away, his chest heaving erratically as he fought to draw air into his collapsing lungs. The sudden, violent physical exertion had completely shattered the fragile equilibrium of his decaying body. A sharp, unbearable agony was radiating from the hidden chronogrip relic against his ribs, the silver runes pulsing so violently beneath his vest that he could feel his own skin blistering from the temporal heat. He brought his right hand to his mouth, a series of deep, violent coughs tearing through his throat, completely uncontrollable this time. When he pulled his hand away, his palm was completely flooded with thick, dark crimson blood that trickled down his wrist, staining the pristine white sleeve of his inner shirt. A thin line of red leaked continuously from the corner of his mouth, dripping onto the wet concrete between his boots. His vision in his remaining clear eye flickered erratically, the edges narrowing into a dark, suffocating tunnel of black static. He was right on the absolute edge of a physical collapse. Iris gasped, her hands flying to her mouth as she saw the sheer volume of blood pouring from his lips. The absolute horror of his physical condition completely overwhelmed her animosity. She scrambled forward on her hands and knees across the wet grass, reaching out toward him with a desperate, instinctive kindness that her soul simply could not suppress. "Leo," she cried out, her voice breaking with a sudden, terrifying sorrow that echoed the past timelines. "Oh my God, you are bleeding. Are you hurt? Did the concrete hit you? Please, just let me help you. Stay back." Leo roared, his voice sounding like torn leather as he violently swung his arm to knock her outstretched hand away before she could make physical contact with his skin. He used the concrete utility wall behind him to drag his breaking body to his feet, his knees trembling so violently that he could barely maintain his balance. He glared down at her with his single bloodshot eye, his face pale as a sheet, the dark crimson blood staining his chin and teeth making him look like a literal demon from a nightmare. "Don't you dare touch me, Iris," he hissed through his bloody teeth, injecting every single remaining drop of his hatred and venom into his cracking voice. "Do you honestly think I did this to save a pathetic creature like you? Don't flatter yourself. I saw the truck losing control from the top of the hill. I knew that if a stupid, clumsy girl like you got crushed right in front of the administrative wing, the entire campus would be locked down by the police for weeks, and my own schedules would be completely ruined. I threw you out of the way because your public death would be an annoying inconvenience to my life. I would have done the exact same thing for a stray dog blocking the street. Iris froze on the concrete, her outstretched hand remaining suspended in the freezing air. The sudden, brutal cruelty of his words acted like an absolute poison, instantly killing the fragile warmth and gratitude that had begun to form in her chest. The green eyes that had looked at him with a momentary, beautiful concern instantly darkened, the glass shattering once again into a deep, cold ocean of absolute horror, disgust, and pure hatred. She looked at the blood on his face, she looked at the icy glare in his single eye, and she realized that there was no hidden kindness inside him. He was simply a malicious, unfeeling sociopath who viewed her survival as nothing more than a logistical convenience. "You are sick," she whispered, her voice dropping into a flat, trembling monotone of pure, absolute revulsion as she slowly stood up from the wet grass, stepping away from him as if he were a pile of toxic waste. "You are an absolutely disgusting, broken human being, Leo. I don't know what kind of demon crawled into your soul, but I pray to God that I never have to look at your miserable face ever again. I would rather have died under those pipes than owe a single second of my life to a monster like you." She didn't bother to pick up her scattered chemistry textbooks. She turned her back to him, her shoulders shaking with silent, angry tears as she walked away from the intersection, her small figure quickly disappearing into the thick, protective canopy of the gray campus fog. The moment she vanished from his line of sight, Leo's remaining strength failed him entirely. His knees gave out, and he collapsed heavily onto the cold concrete, his body curling into a tight, defensive ball as a massive wave of physical agony swept over his consciousness. He clutched his chest, his bleeding fingers clawing at the stone as he let out a low, muffled sob that was completely swallowed by the howling autumn wind. He had done it again. He had faced the physical trap of the universe and successfully torn it to pieces. He had kept her heart beating, and he had reinforced the iron wall of her hatred with an absolute, permanent finality. She would never look at him with kindness again. She would never try to help him. Her soul was entirely safe from the countdown of fate. Leo lay alone on the ruined sidewalk, the dark crimson blood dripping slowly from his lips into the gray dust of the pulverized concrete. He reached inside his vest, his trembling, blood-stained fingers resting against the cold, silent metal of the chronogrip relic that had given him his wish. He was a dying monster standing watch over a beautiful world that had completely forgotten his name, and he would continue to walk through the flames of his self-inflicted execution until the very last grain of sand slipped through his broken hourglass. The transition from autumn to winter happened overnight, turning the city into a freezing, unforgiving expanse of white frost and skeletal black trees. The heavy gray fog that had defined the past few weeks had finally solidified into a biting, icy mist that hung low over the university campus, coating every stone pathway and brick wall in a thin, treacherous layer of slick ice. The students walked with short, hurried steps, their breath escaping in thick clouds of white vapor as they buried their faces deep within their heavy winter scarves and coats. For Leo, the arrival of the sub-zero temperatures was a brutal accelerator to his already rapidly decaying physical form. The thin, dry air made every single breath feel like he was inhaling shards of broken glass, triggering violent, deep chest coughs that left him completely exhausted and leaning against the cold brick walls for support. He sat silently in the shadows of the old, disused clock tower courtyard, a place where nobody ever came during the freezing winter mornings. The timeline had officially reached the 12th day before the final climax. Less than 2 weeks remained of the 100 days, and Leo could feel the absolute bottom of his biological hourglass rapidly approaching. His reflection in the frost-covered windows of the campus buildings was no longer that of a young university student. He looked like a tragic, ghostly apparition. His hair was now entirely a stark, snowy white, falling in dry, brittle strands across his pale, hollow forehead. The heavy, milky darkness had completely swallowed his left eye, leaving him in absolute blindness on that side, while his right eye burned with a constant, bloodshot fatigue from the sheer lack of sleep. The permanent tremor had taken over his entire left arm, a violent, rhythmic shaking that he could only suppress by wrapping his heavy winter coat tightly around his torso and jamming his fist into his pocket, where his bleeding fingers clutched the ice-cold, vibrating frame of the chronogrip relic. He pulled his leather-bound notebook from his pocket with an agonizingly slow movement, his stiff, frozen fingers barely able to grip the worn leather cover. He flipped the pages using his right hand, his single clear eye focusing on the deeply indented charcoal pencil marks that detailed the horrific events of the 7th timeline. He did not need the notes to remember the terror, but his fracturing mind required the cold stability of the written word to remain focused. According to his records, The seventh timeline had featured one of the universe's most insidious and subtle traps. On the 12th day before the end, at exactly 6:30 in the evening, a localized electrical short circuit in the basement of the old science library had triggered a rapid, toxic chemical fire. Iris, who had been staying late to finish a complex research assignment, had been trapped inside the windowless basement archive, suffocating from the thick, poisonous smoke before the emergency services could even breach the heavy iron security doors. In that previous life, Leo had been studying right across the room from her. He had managed to smash the heavy reinforced glass window with a steel chair, dragging her unconscious body out into the freezing night air, just seconds before the entire room exploded into a roaring furnace of chemical flames. The intense smoke inhalation had permanently damaged his own lungs in that timeline, forcing him to execute a desperate reset just 3 days later when his body began to fail. Today was that exact same 12th day. The weather conditions were perfectly identical, and the old science library's ancient heating system was already groaning and rattling under the strain of the sudden winter freeze. The universe was quietly assembling its invisible gears in the dark, preparing the exact same electrical failure, completely uncaring of the fact that Leo and Iris were no longer speaking. Leo closed the notebook, slipping it back into his pocket as a violent fit of coughing shook his entire fragile frame. He pressed a thick cloth against his mouth, holding his breath as the internal spasms tore through his chest, sending waves of white-hot agony radiating outward from the relic against his ribs. When he pulled the cloth away, it was completely soaked through with a heavy, dark crimson fluid that dripped onto the white frost between his boots. He did not even blink at the sight of his own blood. He simply wiped his pale lips, adjusted his dark wool cap to ensure every single strand of his white hair was hidden from public view, and stood up from the stone bench. His knees popped with a dry, hollow sound, and a sudden wave of dizziness forced him to steady himself against the frozen stone wall for several long seconds before his vision finally cleared. He walked toward the old science library, his heavy boots making a soft, crunching sound against the frosted concrete. He had no intention of entering the building today. He could not risk being anywhere near her when the danger manifested. Over the past several weeks, the absolute wall of hatred he had built between them had remained completely unbroken. Iris had taken his brutal words at the intersection and used them to fuel a profound, permanent loathing for his existence. She no longer looked at him with confusion or curiosity. Whenever she accidentally caught sight of his solitary figure from a distance, her pale face would instantly harden into an expression of absolute, unfiltered revulsion. She viewed him as a disgusting, malicious predator, a broken sociopath who stalked her for his own sick entertainment. That hatred was her ultimate protection, but the sheer emotional weight of it was a slow, agonizing execution for Leo's heart. He was forced to watch the girl he loved more than life itself live her life from the freezing, dark shadows of the campus, completely forgotten and utterly reviled by the only person he had torn his soul apart to save. He watched her from the back rows of the lecture halls, he watched her from the distant tree lines of the courtyards, and he watched her walk home in the evenings, always ensuring she was safe, always standing as her silent, invisible shield against the hostile mechanics of fate. He had become a ghost in her world, a phantom sentinel who would gladly bleed to death in the darkness just to ensure her tomorrow could exist. He reached the exterior of the old science library at exactly 5:45 in the evening. The winter sun had already dropped completely below the city skyline, plunging the campus into a deep, freezing twilight illuminated only by the faint, flickering yellow glow of the old street lamps. The ancient brick building loomed ahead like a dark fortress, its high, narrow windows reflecting the cold, starry sky above. Leo bypassed the main entrance entirely, stepping into the narrow, shadow-drenched alleyway that ran along the western side of the structure, where the main high-voltage electrical breakers and power transformers were housed inside a locked iron cage. The alleyway was freezing, the wind whistling loudly between the brick walls as it whipped up small flurries of dry snow. Leo approached the heavy iron cage, his trembling right hand pulling a set of heavy industrial wire cutters from beneath his coat. His left arm was shaking so violently now that he had to physically wedge his elbow against his ribs just to keep his body stable. He reached through the iron bars of the cage, his single clear eye focusing on the thick, insulated main power cables that fed thousands of volts of electricity into the building's ancient basement grid. He did not possess the physical strength to cut through the reinforced copper cables with sheer muscle power anymore. He rested the heavy cutters against the central master breaker switch, his teeth clenching tightly as he prepared to execute a dangerous, brute force disruption. He reached deep inside his vest, his bleeding fingers pressing hard against the central mechanical node of the chronogrip relic. He did not initiate a full reset. Instead, he drew a small, localized surge of the device's raw temporal energy, channeling the volatile static straight through his own nervous system and into his right hand. A violent, blinding flash of violet electricity erupted from his fingertips, accompanied by a sharp, loud crack that echoed through the empty alleyway like a gunshot. The extreme surge of temporal force instantly shattered the heavy iron master switch, completely severing the main internal electrical connection of the building within a fraction of a millisecond. The sudden, immense electrical feedback traveled straight up Leo's arm, knocking his fragile body completely off his feet and sending him crashing heavily against the hard, frozen brick wall of the alley. He lay on the icy concrete for a long, agonizing minute, his chest heaving erratically as his entire upper body vibrated with a terrifying, high-voltage numbness. His right hand was deeply scorched, the skin blackened and blistered from the intense electrical discharge, and a fresh torrent of dark crimson blood was leaking continuously from his nose and mouth, staining the cold snow beneath his head. The relic against his ribs was screaming with a high-pitched, metallic hum, its silver runes burning so intensely through his shirt that he could smell the faint scent of his own singed flesh. The localized surge had taken another massive bite out of his rapidly evaporating life force, pushing him even closer to the absolute brink of total physical collapse. But as he looked past the edge of the alleyway, he saw the immediate, tactical success of his action. The entire old science library had been instantaneously plunged into absolute, pitch-black darkness. Every single window, every interior light, and every piece of ancient laboratory machinery had completely died, killing the power grid before the insidious short circuit in the basement could ever spark the toxic chemical fire. A few seconds later, the heavy front doors of the library flew open, and a loud, chaotic murmur of voices filled the quiet evening air as dozens of confused students began to filter out onto the concrete steps. The building administrators were shouting through the darkness, waving flashlights as they officially announced that the facility would be closed for the remainder of the night due to a catastrophic master breaker failure. Leo dragged his breaking body up from the frozen ground of the alleyway, using his uninjured left hand to wipe the thick blood from his chin. He leaned heavily against the brick corner, his single clear eye focusing intensely on the crowd of students gathering under the flickering street lamps near the entrance. There she was. Walking out through the heavy doors, surrounded by a group of her classmates, was Iris. She was wearing her dark green winter coat, a soft blue wool scarf wrapped neatly around her neck. She looked thoroughly annoyed about the sudden power outage, her eyebrows furrowed as she gestured toward her backpack, complaining to her friends about how she hadn't been able to finish saving her research data before the computers died. She was completely uninjured. There was no thick, poisonous smoke lining her lungs. There were no terrifying chemical flames chasing her down the narrow corridors, and no suffocating darkness waiting to claim her soul. She was alive, healthy, and completely safe from the universe's trap. A profound, beautiful wave of absolute relief washed over Leo's fractured spirit, so intense that it completely numbed the agonizing burns on his hand and the freezing wind tearing through his coat. He let out a long, shuddering breath, a faint, genuine smile touching his bloody lips for the first time in 40 days. He watched her from the deep, protective shadows of the alleyway as she began to walk down the main campus path, her friends laughing and talking around her as they headed toward the warmth of the student cafeterias. As she reached the center of the courtyard, Iris suddenly stopped dead in her tracks. A strange, abrupt stillness came over her entire frame, and her laughter died completely. She slowly turned her head, her green eyes scanning the dark, shadow-drenched corners of the campus with a sudden, profound intensity. It was that exact same ghostly echo from the past timelines manifesting within her soul once again. Despite the fact that she thoroughly detested Leo, despite the fact that she believed him to be a heartless monster, her spirit could still feel the invisible, bleeding presence of her protector standing in the darkness nearby. Her gaze tracked slowly across the courtyard, moving closer and closer toward the narrow alleyway where he stood hidden. Leo quickly stepped back into the absolute darkness of the brick alcove, pulling his dark coat tightly around himself, completely vanishing from her line of sight. He held his breath, his heart hammering against his scorched ribs as he waited in the frozen silence. "What are you looking at, Iris?" one of her friends asked, turning back to look at her with a confused expression. Come on, it is absolutely freezing out here. Let's go inside before the food gets cold. Iris remained perfectly still for a few more seconds, her green eyes staring deeply into the dark mouth of the alleyway, a subtle, confused frown creaking across her pale brow. A strange, unexplainable weight had suddenly settled over her chest, a profound feeling of sorrow that she simply could not understand or explain to anyone else. But she finally shook her head, pulling her blue scarf tighter around her neck as she turned away from the darkness. "It's nothing," she whispered softly, her voice carrying a faint, trembling quality as she hurried to catch up with her group. "I just thought I saw someone standing in the shadows. Let's go." Leo watched her small figure disappear entirely into the thick, protective canopy of the campus fog, her warmth vanishing from his frozen world once again. He slouched against the cold brick wall, his legs completely giving out beneath him as he slid down to the icy concrete floor of the alleyway, his body curling into a tight, defensive ball against the howling winter wind. He had saved her again. He had broken the universe's mechanical trap from the darkness, ensuring her heart would continue to beat for another day without ever allowing her to know the truth. He was her phantom guardian, a dying monster enduring the slow, agonizing destruction of his own body and soul, just to stand watch over a beautiful world that had completely forgotten his name. He reached inside his vest, his blistered, bleeding fingers resting against the cold, silent metal of the chronogrip relic that had granted him his wish. He would continue to wear the mask of the villain, and he would continue to walk through the flames of his self-inflicted execution until the very last grain of sand slipped through his broken hourglass. The countdown to the absolute end of the 100 days had finally reached its last single digit. Only 5 days remained of the 10th and final reset, and the city had completely dissolved into a silent, frozen wasteland of white sheets and black iron. A massive, historic winter blizzard had descended upon the valley, burying the university campus under feet of heavy, dense snow that muffled every sound, turning the bustling academic grounds into a ghostly, deserted graveyard. The wind did not merely blow through the empty quadrangles. It howled like a dying animal, whipping up blinding curtains of white powder that obscured the street lamps and reduced the visible world to a freezing, fractured blur. For Leo, the sub-zero temperatures were no longer just an environmental discomfort. The freezing air was a physical enemy, a sharp blade that sliced directly into his ruined respiratory system with every single ragged breath he forced himself to take. He stood in the dark, recessed doorway of the abandoned arts pavilion, his entire body shivering with a deep, violent tremor that had nothing to do with the external cold. The physical toll of the chronogrip relic had reached its absolute terminal stage. His hair was completely white now, a stark, brilliant silver that shone ominously against the dark hood of his winter coat. The heavy, milky blindness had permanently claimed his left eye, leaving that half of his face completely numb and expressionless, while his remaining right eye was deeply bloodshot, tracking the world through a narrow, exhausting tunnel of dark static. His left arm was completely useless now, the nerves entirely fried by the temporal backdrafts of the previous resets. He kept the dead limb pinned against his torso, using his right hand to tightly, desperately grip the heavy brass frame of the relic hidden deep inside his vest. The device was burning with a terrifying, constant frequency, its silver runes vibrating so violently against his ribs that he could feel the mechanical heat bubbling his skin through his clothes. He was a walking corpse, held together by nothing but sheer force of will and the desperate, bleeding desire to see one single girl survive the winter. With a slow, agonizing effort, Leo pulled his leather notebook from his coat pocket using his teeth and his right hand, his frozen fingers lacking the dexterity to manage the simple task. He leaned his back against the frozen stone wall, using his chin to hold the pages open as his single clear eye focused on the faded charcoal lines of his own handwriting. This was the entry for the 95th day of the third timeline. In that specific reality, the universe had chosen the peak of the winter storm to execute its mechanical judgment. At exactly 7:15 in the evening, Iris had attempted to walk home, using the isolated eastern forest pathway to avoid the treacherous ice on the main roads. In that timeline, a massive, centuries-old oak tree branch, weighed down by nearly 500 pounds of solid black ice, had snapped without a single sound, crashing directly onto her path and instantly crushing her skull before she could even look up. Leo had been walking 20 yards behind her in that life. He had witnessed the exact moment the white snow turned to a horrific crimson fountain, forcing him to use his third desperate reset while screaming into the empty, uncaring void. Today was that exact 95th day. The digital clock tower across the campus was slowly ticking towards 7 o'clock, its distant, hollow chimes completely swallowed by the howling blizzard. The universe was quietly resetting its trap, aligning the physical variables of wind speed, ice weight, and human movement to repeat the execution, entirely indifferent to the fact that the script of their lives had been completely rewritten. Leo slipped the notebook back into his coat, his chest suddenly tightening with a sharp, suffocating restriction that made his knees buckle completely. He collapsed onto his knees in the deep snow, a violent, uncontrollable fit of coughing tearing through his throat with a wet, tearing sound. He slammed his right hand over his mouth, his entire frame shaking as the internal spasms ruptured the fragile blood vessels in his lungs. When he finally pulled his hand away, a thick, dark pool of fresh crimson blood was splattered across the pristine white snow between his knees, steaming slightly in the freezing air before solidifying into an icy red crust. He did not even look at the blood. He simply wiped his stained chin with the back of his sleeve, used the stone doorway to painfully drag his breaking body back to his feet, and pulled his dark wool cap low over his white hair. He had no time to bleed. He had no time to feel the agonizing fires burning through his internal organs. He had to reach the eastern forest pathway before she did. Over the past several weeks, the absolute wall of hatred he had engineered between them had remained completely flawless. Iris detested his very existence with a passion that bordered on terror. Whenever their paths crossed in the narrow campus corridors, she would instantly freeze, her bright green eyes clouding over with an expression of absolute, unfiltered revulsion and disgust before she quickly turned her back and walked as far away from him as physically possible. She believed him to be a malicious, unstable sociopath who stalked her for his own sick entertainment. That beautiful, perfect hatred was the shield that kept her alive. As long as she viewed him as a monster, she would never approach him, she would never care for him, and she would absolutely never confess her love to him, keeping the deadly countdown of the curse permanently paused. But as Leo dragged his numb legs through the deep, drifting snow of the campus, the absolute loneliness of his position settled over his spirit like a suffocating blanket of ice. He was her phantom protector, a dying boy who was systematically tearing his own humanity to pieces to buy her another tomorrow, walking through a frozen hell while the only person he loved in the entire universe prayed for his absolute disappearance. He could see the faint yellow lights of the library building fading into the white void behind him as he stepped into the dark, towering tree line of the eastern forest path. The forest pathway was a narrow, treacherous strip of concrete that wound through a dense grove of ancient, overgrown oak trees. Tonight, the area was completely dark, the heavy snowstorms having knocked out the localized electrical lines hours ago. The only illumination came from the faint, ethereal glow of the snow itself, creating a surreal, monochrome landscape of deep shadows and skeletal white branches that creaked loudly under the immense weight of the winter ice. Leo walked slowly, his single right eye scanning the high canopy above his head. He knew the forest by heart. He had mapped every single tree during his previous lifetimes. After 10 minutes of agonizing progression, he finally reached the central clearing where the ancient oak tree stood, its massive, horizontal limb stretching directly across the center of the walkway like a giant, frozen arm. He stopped, leaning heavily against a nearby birch tree to support his weight. He looked up at the massive limb. It was completely encased in a thick, glass-like coating of solid black ice, the heavy icicles hanging from its bark looking like a row of jagged, transparent teeth. The wind was hitting the branch with immense force, causing the ancient wood to produce a low, agonizing groan that resonated through the quiet forest. It was right on the absolute threshold of structural failure. The trap was set. All the universe needed now was for the target to walk beneath it. At exactly 7:12 p.m., the sound of soft, hesitant footsteps crunching against the frozen snow reached Leo's ears from the western entrance of the path. He turned his head slightly, his single clear eye focusing through the shifting curtains of white powder. Walking slowly through the storm, her head bowed deeply against the freezing wind, was Iris. She was wrapped tightly in her dark green winter coat, her soft blue wool scarf buried under her chin, her hands shoved deep into her pockets as she carefully navigated the slick, icy surface of the walkway. She was moving at a hurried pace, her face pale and drawn from a long day of studying, completely unaware that less than 3 yards ahead of her, a 500-pound block of frozen timber was waiting to take her life. Leo did not hesitate. He did not have the physical strength to run and push her out of the way this time. His decaying nervous system would never respond fast enough to a sudden sprint. He had to intercept her early, and he had to do it in a way that would violently reinforce her absolute disgust for him. He stepped out from the shadow of the birch tree, placing his white-haired, cloaked figure directly in the center of the narrow pathway, completely blocking her progression, just 10 feet away from the danger zone. Iris raised her head to shield her face from a sudden gust of wind, and the moment her green eyes recognized the solitary, pale figure standing in the darkness before her, she stopped dead in her tracks. The exhaustion on her face vanished instantly, replaced by a violent, defensive tension that made her entire body tremble. Her eyes dilated with a mixture of intense anger and deep, instinctual revulsion. She took 2 sharp steps backward into the snow, her fingers clenching into tight fists inside her pockets as she stared at him through the blinding flurries. "Are you completely insane?" Iris screamed, her voice cracking with a sharp, defensive fury that cut through the whistling wind like a whip. "Why are you doing this? Why are you hiding in the dark like a disgusting creep? I told you to stay away from me. I told you I would call the campus security if you ever came near me again. Get out of my way, Leo. I swear to God, I absolutely despise you. Just let me go home and leave me alone." Leo stood perfectly still in the center of the path, his face frozen into that practiced, unyielding mask of stone that hid the absolute ocean of blood and tears screaming inside his chest. He forced his single right eye to narrow into a cold, contemptuous glare, his voice dropping into that familiar, venomous monotone that he had used to systematically shatter her spirit over the past 90 days. "Do you honestly believe that the entire universe revolves around your pathetic little walks, Iris?" Leo sneered, his tone dripping with an artificial, chilling arrogance that echoed perfectly against the frozen trees. "I don't care about your hollow threats, and I certainly didn't come to this miserable forest to look at your boring face. I happen to be taking a shortcut back to my apartment, and you are currently standing on the only cleared section of this walkway. If you are too weak to handle a little winter wind, then you should have stayed inside the library like the pathetic, needy child you are. You are a monster," Iris cried out, her green eyes flashing with a sudden, brilliant heat born of pure frustration, exhaustion, and the deep, permanent scars his cruelty had inflicted upon her soul. Tears of pure anger welled up in her eyes, freezing almost instantly against her pale cheeks as she stared at his white-streaked hair and bloody lips. "Why do you hate me so much? What did I ever do to you to deserve this? You treat me like I am a piece of garbage, you follow me through the dark, and you make my life an absolute living hell. I wish I had never seen your face. I wish you would just disappear from this world and never come back." The words "I wish you would just disappear from this world and never come back" sliced through the final remnants of Leo's remaining sanity, a physical pain that felt infinitely worse than the temporal fires eating away at his heart. It was the absolute confirmation of his tactical success. She hated him with a perfect, permanent finality. Yet, the raw emotional weight of hearing the girl he had died 9 times to protect wish for his absolute demise made him want to collapse into the snow and never rise again. But he didn't have a single second to grieve. He looked past her shoulder, his single eye catching the sudden, fatal realignment of the wind. At exactly 7:15 p.m., a massive, violent gust of sub-zero wind roared through the eastern forest canopy, striking the ancient oak tree with the force of a physical battering ram. A sharp, explosive crack like a rifle shot echoed through the clearing as the main trunk fractured under the immense stress. The massive, 500-pound horizontal limb, heavily weighted down by the solid black ice, snapped completely free from its mooring, descending toward the pathway with a terrifying, instantaneous velocity. Iris heard the sudden, deafening crack above her head and instinctively gasped, her body freezing in pure terror as she looked up, her green eyes widening as she realized that a literal wall of frozen timber was falling directly toward her. Before she could even attempt to move, Leo lunged forward with a sudden, desperate burst of physical force. He didn't push her away. Instead, he used his right hand to violently grab the collar of her winter coat, forcefully yanking her backward with all his remaining strength, dragging her body through the deep snow drifts just as the massive branch completed its descent. A catastrophic crash shattered the silence of the forest. The massive frozen limb slammed directly onto the concrete pathway with an earth-shaking thud that pulverized the solid concrete into a spray of sharp ice crystals and gray gravel. The force of the impact sent a violent shockwave through the ground, throwing both of them completely off their feet. The thick, jagged icicles that had coated the branch shattered into thousands of sharp, needle-like shards, raining down across the open clearing like a storm of broken glass. The entire forest fell into a dead, suffocating silence, broken only by the howling of the wind and the low, heavy breathing of two people who had just cheated death by a fraction of an inch. The massive branch now rested directly over the exact spot where Iris had been standing just 2 seconds before, its thick bark embedded deep within the ruined walkway. If she had taken a single step forward, or if Leo hadn't stopped her to argue, her body would have been completely flattened beneath the immense weight. Iris lay on her back in the deep snow, her chest heaving erratically as she stared blankly at the massive wall of ice and wood that blocked the pathway ahead of her. Her entire body was shaking violently from pure adrenaline, her breath escaping in quick, frantic puffs of white vapor. She looked at the pulverized concrete, she looked at the shattered ice needles, and slowly, a terrifying, overwhelming realization began to dawn within her mind. He hadn't been stalking her to hurt her. He had stopped her. He had dragged her back. He had saved her life for the second time this semester. She slowly turned her head toward Leo, the anger and revulsion in her green eyes suddenly fracturing into a deep, dark pool of absolute confusion, terror, and an unexplainable, ancient grief that her soul simply could not suppress. "Leo," she whispered, her voice trembling so violently that the words were barely audible over the wind. You saved me again. Why? Why do you keep doing this if you hate me? What is happening? Please, just tell me the truth." Leo was kneeling in the deep snow 5 feet away, his entire body hunched forward as a sudden, catastrophic physical collapse took hold of his remaining life force. The violent physical exertion of yanking her back had completely ruptured the fragile equilibrium of his decaying chest. A massive, unstoppable torrent of dark crimson blood poured from his mouth and nose, completely flooding his right hand and staining the pristine white snow beneath him in a wide, horrifying circle of deep red. His vision in his single clear eye was flickering erratically, the dark static threatening to swallow his consciousness entirely. He could feel the chronogrip relic against his ribs pulsing with a cold, dead weight now, signaling that his physical container had officially expended its reserves. He was right on the absolute edge of death. Iris gasped in pure horror at the sheer volume of blood pouring from his lips, her defensive walls completely crumbling beneath her natural, unstoppably compassionate spirit. She scrambled forward on her hands and knees through the deep snow, reaching out toward his trembling, white-haired form with a desperate desire to help him. "Leo, oh my God, you are dying. Please, just let me help you. I am calling an ambulance. Don't move. Stay back." Leo roared, his voice sounding like a collection of broken stones as he violently swung his bleeding right arm to strike her hand away before she could establish any physical contact with his skin. He used the trunk of the nearby birch tree to painfully, miraculously drag his breaking body back to his feet, his knees knocking together so violently that he looked like a marionette with severed strings. He glared down at her with his single bloodshot right eye, his pale, hollow face covered in dark crimson stains making him look like a terrifying demon from a nightmare. "Don't you dare look at me with your pathetic pity, Iris." Leo hissed through his bloody teeth, forcing every single remaining drop of his hatred, venom, and artificial malice into his cracking voice. "Do you honestly think I did this for you? I told you before, I don't care about your pathetic life. I saw the branch cracking from the moment I entered this forest. I knew that if a stupid, clumsy girl like you got herself crushed in this grove, the entire university administration would close the eastern entrance for investigation, and my own daily commutes would be completely disrupted for months. I dragged you back because your messy, public death would be an annoying inconvenience to my schedules. I would have done the exact same thing for a stray dog blocking the path." Iris froze on her knees in the deep snow, her outstretched hand remaining suspended in the freezing air. The sudden, brutal cruelty of his words acted like an absolute, permanent poison, instantly extinguishing the fragile warmth and confusion that had begun to form in her chest. The green eyes that had looked at him with a momentary, beautiful concern instantly hardened, the glass shattering once again into an ocean of profound horror, absolute revulsion, and pure, unadulterated hatred. She looked at the thick blood on his face, she looked at the icy glare in his single eye, and she realized that there was no hidden kindness inside him. He was simply a disgusting, heartless sociopath who viewed her survival as nothing more than a logistical convenience. "You are sick," she whispered, her voice dropping into a flat, icy monotone of pure, absolute revulsion as she slowly stood up from the snow, stepping away from him as if he were a pile of toxic waste. "You are an absolutely disgusting, broken monster, Leo. I don't know what kind of demon possesses your soul, but I pray to God that I never have to look at your miserable face ever again." I would rather have died under that branch than owe a single second of my life to a creature as vile as you." She didn't look back. She turned her back to him, her shoulders shaking with silent, angry tears as she walked away from the clearing, her small figure quickly disappearing into the blinding, protective canopy of the white winter blizzard. The moment her form vanished completely from his line of sight, Leo's remaining strength failed him entirely. His knees gave out, and he collapsed heavily onto the cold, bloody snow, his body curling into a tight, defensive ball as a massive wave of physical agony swept over his consciousness. He clutched his chest with his bleeding right hand, his fingers clawing at the frozen ground as he let out a low, muffled sob that was completely swallowed by the howling winter wind. He had done it again. He had faced the physical trap of the universe and successfully torn it to pieces from the darkness. He had kept her heart beating, and he had reinforced the iron armor of her hatred with an absolute, permanent finality. She would never look at him with kindness again. She would never try to help him. Her soul was entirely safe from the countdown of fate. Only 5 days remained until the 100th day, 5 days of wearing the mask of the monster, of driving her away, and of watching her live her life from the cold, lonely shadows of a dying timeline. He reached inside his vest, his trembling, blood-stained fingers resting against the cold, silent metal of the chronogrip relic that had given him his wish. He was a dying monster standing watch over a beautiful world that had completely forgotten his name, and he would continue to walk through the flames of his self-inflicted execution until the very last grain of sand slipped through his broken hourglass. The dawn of the 99th day broke over the city not with a roar, but with a terrifying, absolute silence. The historic blizzard that had spent the last week ravaging the valley had finally exhausted its fury, leaving behind a frozen world trapped under a thick, motionless shroud of white frost. The sky above was a pale, cloudless sheet of iron gray, casting a cold, ambient light over the deserted university campus. Every tree branch was perfectly encased in crystal ice, every stone archway was lined with heavy, hanging icicles, and the vast open lawns looked like a solid, unyielding ocean of compressed snow. There was no wind left to stir the air, no sound of traffic from the distant city streets, and no warmth to soften the freezing breath of the coming winter. For Leo, this absolute stillness felt like the quiet before a final execution. The grand clock tower at the center of the campus stood like a towering monument to his suffering, its frozen black hands pointing directly toward the final hours of his long, agonizing journey. Inside the dark, freezing confines of his small off-campus apartment, Leo lay perfectly still on the bare wooden floor, his back pressed hard against the cold brick wall. The apartment was entirely empty now, devoid of any furniture or personal belongings, looking more like an abandoned storage vault than a place where a human being lived. The air inside the room was so cold that his ragged breath escaped in thick, continuous clouds of white vapor, hanging lazily in the dim light before dissipating against the ceiling. The physical toll of the 10th reset had officially stripped away the last remaining defenses of his biological vessel. His hair was completely, flawlessly white, a pale, lifeless silver that fell in brittle strands across his hollow, sunken cheeks. The heavy, milky shroud had entirely consumed his left eye, rendering it completely useless, while his right eye twitched with a deep, bloodshot fatigue, the edges of his vision constantly blurred by a heavy, suffocating blanket of dark static. His entire left side had fallen into a state of total paralysis. His left arm hung completely dead at his side, a useless weight of cold flesh and unresponsive nerves that had been entirely destroyed by the intense temporal backdrafts of the previous resets. He could only move his right hand, his stiff, frozen fingers wrapping with a white-knuckled desperation around the heavy brass frame of the chronogrip relic hidden beneath his torn vest. The ancient device was no longer silent. It was vibrating with a low, continuous, and metallic hum that resonated directly through his ribs, its intricate silver runes glowing with a faint, volatile violet light that pulsed in perfect rhythm with his failing heartbeat. Every single thump of his heart felt like a physical hammer striking his chest from the inside, a desperate, fluttering organ struggling to push the remaining drops of his life force through a body that was systematically shutting down. With an immense, agonizing effort of will, Leo used his right hand and his teeth to drag his leather-bound notebook across the cold floorboards. He managed to prop the worn cover open against his knee, his single clear eye focusing on the faded charcoal pencil marks that detailed the horrific events of the 99th day in the second lifetime. In that distant, unwritten reality, the universe had waited until the absolute eve of the 100 days to unleash its most devastating physical trap. At exactly 4:45 in the afternoon, a massive, pressurized underground steam pipe running beneath the main courtyard had suffered a catastrophic structural rupture due to the extreme winter freeze. The resulting explosion had torn through the solid stone pavement, releasing a massive, blinding cloud of superheated vapor and flying debris that had instantly enveloped the path where Iris was walking back from her final examinations. In that second life, Leo had been walking beside her. He had managed to violently throw his arm around her waist, pulling her into a nearby concrete alcove, but the intense, scalding steam had fatally burned his own throat and lungs, forcing him to initiate his second desperate reset while choking on his own blood. Today was that exact 99 day. The script of the universe was quietly aligning its invisible gears beneath the frozen earth, preparing the exact same mechanical failure at the exact same hour, completely indifferent to the reality that Leo and Iris were now absolute strangers. Leo closed the notebook using his chin, a sudden, sharp spike of agony ripping through his chest with the force of an iron spike. A violent, deep-seated fit of coughing seized his entire frame, completely uncontrollable this time. He pressed his right palm over his mouth, his body curling into a tight, defensive ball on the floor as the internal spasms tore at the fragile, decaying tissue of his lungs. When the coughing finally subsided, he pulled his hand away to find his palm completely flooded with a thick, dark crimson blood that trickled down his forearm, staining the dark fabric of his sleeve before dripping slowly onto the dusty wooden floorboards. He did not allow himself a single second of despair or pity. He slowly wiped his bloody lips with the back of his hand, used his remaining strength to drag himself to his feet against the brick wall, and reached for the heavy black winter coat resting on the floor. It took him nearly 10 minutes of agonizing, clumsy movements to slip his right arm into the sleeve and pull the heavy fabric over his paralyzed left shoulder. He pulled the dark wool cap low over his brow, ensuring every single strand of his snowy white hair was completely hidden from view. He looked down at the dark pool of blood on the floor, then at the leather notebook containing the records of his 10 lifetimes. With a quiet, resolute finality, he took a box of matches from his pocket, struck a single flame, and dropped it onto the open pages of the book. He watched in silence as the charcoal notes, the dates of her deaths, and the memories of their shared joys were systematically consumed by the bright orange flames, turning into nothing but gray, weightless ash on the cold floor. He wanted to leave absolutely no trace of his existence behind. When the final hour arrived, he wanted the world to forget he had ever drawn breath. Leo stepped out of the apartment building, his heavy right boot striking the frozen concrete with a slow, dragging rhythm as his paralyzed left leg trailed slightly behind him. The afternoon air was bitterly cold, so sharp that it stung his throat like liquid fire with every shallow breath he could manage. He navigated the quiet, snow-choked streets leading toward the university campus, using the iron railings and brick walls to maintain his fragile balance. He walked like a ghost through a forgotten city, his single right eye fixed strictly on the distant, white-topped roofs of the university buildings. He knew that this was the final eve. If he could keep her safe through the next 24 hours, the 100 days would officially expire, the curse would be permanently broken, and her thread of life would be securely woven into the grand tapestry of the future. The cost of her survival was his own absolute destruction, a bargain he had accepted with a proud, unyielding heart 3 years ago. He entered the grand stone gates of the university campus at exactly 4 o'clock in the afternoon. The grounds were largely deserted, the heavy winter freeze having forced most of the students to remain within the warmth of the residential halls. The few individuals who were walking through the courtyards moved quickly, their heads bowed against the biting cold, completely ignoring the solitary, white-haired figure dragging himself through the shadows. Over the past 99 days, Leo had successfully transformed himself into an absolute monster in the eyes of the campus. The rumors of his malicious attitude, his cruel words, and his unstable behavior had solidified into an impenetrable iron wall. He was universally reviled, a dangerous pariah whom everyone actively avoided. That perfect, absolute hatred was the grandest masterpiece of his life. It was the heavy armor that kept Iris safe. Because she despised him with a passion that bordered on terror, she had never approached him, she had never sought his company, and she had absolutely never spoken the deadly words of confession that would trigger the universe's ultimate execution. She viewed him as a disgusting sociopath, a broken human being who had twice weaponized her survival just to insult her intelligence and her loneliness. The memory of her green eyes filled with that pure, unadulterated revulsion in the library and the forest path was a constant, bleeding wound inside Leo's spirit, but it was also the absolute proof of his success. He had willingly traded her love for her life, choosing to spend his final hours on Earth as the villain in her story, so that she could continue to have a story to tell. He reached the grand central courtyard at exactly 4:30 p.m. The vast open space was surrounded by towering, Gothic-style university buildings, its stone pathways completely clear of snow but covered in a treacherous sheet of clear, invisible ice. Leo did not stand near the center. Instead, he positioned his breaking body within the deep, shadow-drenched alcove of the main humanities archway, about 40 yards away from the central underground maintenance access grate. His single clear eye scanned the area with a clinical, tactical intensity. He could hear the low, deep rumbling of the ancient high-pressure steam boilers vibrating beneath the frozen stone floor, a heavy mechanical groan that was growing steadily louder and more erratic with every passing minute. The trap was fully loaded, the pressure building rapidly beneath the earth, waiting for the precise second to explode. At 4:42 p.m., the heavy wooden doors of the central lecture hall swung open, and a small group of students filtered out into the freezing afternoon air, their voices producing small clouds of white mist as they discussed their winter break plans. Among them, walking slightly behind the others, was Iris. She was wrapped tightly in her dark green winter coat, her soft blue wool scarf tucked neatly under her chin. Her green eyes focused intently on the path ahead as she carried a leather portfolio of her art drawings against her chest. She looked radiant despite the bitter cold, her skin pale and healthy, her dark hair catching the low, metallic light of the iron sky. She was completely at peace, entirely unaware that less than 10 yards ahead of her path, a lethal volcanic eruption of superheated steam was preparing to tear the earth apart. Leo watched her from his dark alcove, his breath catching in his throat as a sudden, overwhelming wave of profound affection and heartbreaking sorrow crashed over his fractured soul. This was the girl he had died 9 times to save. This was the soul he had torn his own reality to pieces to protect. To see her breathing, to see her walking whole and uninjured on the 99th day, it was the absolute fulfillment of every silent prayer he had ever offered to the uncaring cosmic clock. The excruciating burns on his hand, the blindness in his eye, the total paralysis of his arm, and the rapid failure of his internal organs. All of it faded into complete insignificance at the simple sight of her living presence. The sacrifice had been entirely worth it, but he had no time to lose himself in the emotion. Iris was moving at a brisk pace, her heavy winter boots stepping closer and closer toward the central maintenance grate. According to the script of the second timeline, she would reach the exact center of the stone path at precisely 4:45, the exact millisecond the pressure valve would fail. Leo knew he could not physically run to intercept her. His paralyzed left leg would collapse beneath him if he attempted a sudden sprint. He could not shout a warning, for she would either ignore the voice of the monster or hesitate in confusion, placing her directly within the fatal blast radius. He had to use a different strategy. He had to cause a distraction that would force her to stop before she ever reached the danger zone, and he had to do it from the darkness. He reached his right hand deep inside his vest, his bleeding fingers gripping the central mechanical node of the chronogrip relic with an absolute, terrifying force. He did not initiate a full reset. Instead, he prepared to draw a massive, highly concentrated surge of the device's raw temporal energy, intending to channel the volatile static straight through the ground to prematurely trigger the pressure release valve before she could reach the path. Leo clenched his teeth so hard that the copper taste of fresh blood flooded his mouth. He focused his mind entirely on the iron grate ahead, his single right eye narrowing as he channeled the final, remaining reserves of his life force directly into the relic. The silver runes erupted into a brilliant, blinding flash of violet light beneath his coat, accompanied by a sharp, high-pitched mechanical shriek that vibrated through the stone archway. A massive wave of volatile temporal electricity traveled down his right arm, lighting up his veins in a terrifying violet glow before shooting out through his boots and into the frozen stone floor of the courtyard. A microsecond later, a catastrophic explosion shattered the silence of the afternoon. The immense surge of temporal energy struck the underground steam valve prematurely, causing the massive high-pressure line to rupture violently, while Iris was still 20 yards away from the danger zone. The heavy iron maintenance grate flew 50 feet into the air, followed by a deafening, volcanic roar as a massive, towering geyser of superheated white steam and pulverized stone debris erupted from the earth. The intense pressure tore through the stone pathways, sending a shower of sharp concrete fragments and boiling water spraying across the central courtyard like shrapnel. The force of the blast sent a violent shockwave through the ground, throwing the group of students completely off their feet and sending them crashing onto the frozen snow banks. Iris screamed in absolute terror, her leather portfolio slipping from her hands as the violent tremor knocked her heavily onto her knees, her drawings scattering across the icy ground like white leaves. The blinding cloud of superheated steam rolled across the center of the courtyard, completely obscuring the path where she would have been walking had she been just 10 seconds quicker. The air was filled with the deafening hiss of the escaping vapor and the frantic, terrified shouting of the students as they scrambled away from the roaring geyser. Iris sat frozen on her knees, her hands clutched tightly against her chest, her body shaking violently from pure adrenaline as she stared blankly at the massive wall of white steam that had just pulverized the stone path ahead of her. The heat from the vapor was intense, melting the snow around her boots within a matter of seconds. She looked at the crater in the earth. She looked at the heavy iron grate that had crashed back down onto the concrete yards away, and slowly, a profound, suffocating dread began to take hold of her mind. It was the third major, near-fatal disaster she had encountered in the span of a single semester. First the truck, then the library fire, and now the steam explosion. The universe felt like it was actively trying to murder her, yet every single time, something bizarre occurred to disrupt the trap before it could claim her life. She slowly turned her head back toward the main humanities archway, her green eyes scanning the dark shadows with a sudden, instinctual intensity. The ghostly echo within her soul was vibrating violently now, filling her chest with an unexplainable, ancient sorrow that she simply could not suppress. She looked deeply into the dark mouth of the stone archway, her gaze tracking across the shadows until it locked directly onto the solitary figure leaning against the brick pillar. Leo was kneeling on the cold stone floor of the alcove, his entire body hunched forward as the absolute final collapse of his physical container took hold of his consciousness. The massive temporal surge had completely fried the remaining neural pathways in his body, leaving his entire frame vibrating with a terrifying, numb static. A massive, unstoppable torrent of dark crimson blood poured continuously from his mouth and nose, completely flooding his right hand and staining the front of his dark winter coat in a wide, horrifying sheet of deep red. His vision in his remaining clear eye was fading rapidly, the dark static closing in from all sides until he could only see the world through a tiny, flickering pinpoint of light. The chronogrip relic against his ribs had fallen completely silent, its silver runes dark and cold, signaling that the device had officially expended the last drop of its temporal power. He was actively dying, his heart beating with a faint, final flutter that was slowing down with every passing second. Iris gasped, her hands flying to her mouth as she saw the sheer, horrifying volume of blood pouring from his lips. The absolute terror of his physical condition completely overwhelmed her animosity and her fear. She forgot about the explosion, she forgot about his cruel words, and she forgot about the hatred she had carried for 90 days. Her naturally compassionate, beautiful soul simply could not witness a human being bleed to death without trying to save them. She scrambled to her feet, dropping her drawings as she ran across the icy courtyard toward the dark alcove, her voice breaking with a sudden, terrifying sorrow that echoed the past 9 lifetimes. "Leo!" she cried out, her tears flowing freely as she closed the distance between them. "Oh my God, Leo! You are bleeding. Please just hold on. Someone call an ambulance. Don't close your eyes, please." Leo raised his bloody right head, his single, bloodshot eye focusing on her approaching form through the fading pinpoint of his vision. He saw the pure, beautiful concern on her face, he heard the terrifying melody of her sorrow, and a sudden, freezing panic seized the final remnants of his mind. She was running toward him. She was coming to save the monster. If she reached him now, if she held his hand in his final moments, the intense emotional gravity between their souls would inevitably force the truth into the light. She would realize the magnitude of his sacrifice, the ghostly memories would solidify, and she would speak the words of love that would condemn her to the curse before the 100 days could officially expire. He had to drive her away one final time. He had to use the absolute last breath in his lungs to lock the villain's mask onto his face forever. "Stay back!" Leo roared, his voice sounding like a collection of grinding iron plates as he violently swung his bleeding right arm to strike the stone wall beside him, using the impact to painfully force his breaking body back to his feet. He leaned his back against the brick pillar, his face pale as a sheet, the dark crimson blood coating his teeth, making him look like a literal demon dying in the shadows. He glared down at her with an intensity that burned with pure, artificial venom. "Don't you dare come near me, Iris," Leo hissed through his bloody teeth, forcing every single remaining ounce of his malice and cruelty into his cracking voice. "Do you honestly think I did this for a pathetic creature like you? I told you before, I don't care if you live or die. I saw the pressure meters fluctuating on the wall hours ago. I knew that if a clumsy, stupid girl like you got yourself exploded in the center of the courtyard, the entire campus would be shut down by the police for the winter break, and my own administrative files would be locked away for months. I triggered the line early because your public death would be an annoying inconvenience to my life. I would have done the exact same thing for a rabid dog blocking the path. Get out of my sight. I hate the very sound of your voice." Iris froze in her tracks, standing exactly 5 feet away from him inside the dark archway. The sudden, brutal cruelty of his words acted like an absolute, permanent poison, instantly killing the fragile warmth, gratitude, and confusion that had begun to form in her chest. The green eyes that had looked at him with so much beautiful concern instantly hardened, the glass shattering one final time into a deep, cold ocean of absolute horror, profound revulsion, and pure, unadulterated hatred. She looked at the thick blood on his face, she looked at the icy glare in his single eye, and she realized that there was no hidden humanity left inside him. He was simply a disgusting, unfeeling monster who viewed her survival as nothing more than a logistical convenience. "You are sick," she whispered, her voice dropping into a flat, icy monotone of pure, absolute revulsion as she slowly backed away from the alcove, her face turning away from him as if he were a pile of toxic waste. "You are an absolutely disgusting, broken creature, Leo. I don't know what kind of demon crawled into your soul, but I pray to God that I never have to look at your miserable face ever again. I would rather have died in that steam than owe a single second of my existence to a monster like you. I hope you die alone in this dark corner." She didn't look back. She turned her back to him, her shoulders shaking with silent, angry tears as she walked away from the archway, her small figure quickly moving across the ruined courtyard, gathering her scattered drawings before vanishing completely into the safety of the distant residential halls. The moment her form disappeared from his line of sight, Leo's remaining strength failed him entirely. His knees gave out completely, and he collapsed heavily onto the cold stone floor of the alcove, his body curling into a tight, defensive ball against the freezing brick wall. The dark static closed in completely over his right eye, plunging his world into an absolute, silent darkness. He could no longer feel the cold winter wind, he could no longer hear the hissing steam, and he could no longer feel the burning pain in his chest. His heart gave a final, slow, and erratic thud before settling into a peaceful stillness. He had done it. He had faced the final eve of the universe and successfully torn the trap to pieces from the darkness. He had kept her heart beating through the 99th day, and he had reinforced the iron wall of her hatred with an absolute, permanent finality. She would never look at him with kindness again. She would never know the truth. Her soul was entirely, perfectly safe from the countdown of fate. Tomorrow, the 100th day would dawn, the sun would rise over a beautiful, living world, and she would walk through the gates of her future, completely whole, radiantly happy, and entirely safe from the curse of his love. Leo lay alone in the dark, silent corner of the archway, his bleeding right hand resting over the cold, dead metal of the relic that had granted him his wish. He was a forgotten monster who had died in the shadows to buy her tomorrow, a solitary sentinel whose name would be completely erased from the record of her life. And he welcomed the empty void with a proud, peaceful heart, knowing that her survival was the only beautiful thing left in a world that had completely forgotten his face. The dawn of the 100th day arrived with a sudden, breathtaking transformation that stunned the entire valley. The thick, oppressive iron-gray clouds that had cloaked the sky for months vanished entirely, leaving behind a vast, crystalline vault of brilliant azure blue. The morning sun rose like a brilliant golden coin, casting warm, radiant light across the frozen university campus, melting the heavy layers of frost and turning the jagged icicles into thousands of dripping, shimmering diamonds. The bitter, howling winter wind had died completely, replaced by a gentle, whispering spring breeze that carried the faint, sweet scent of early pine and awakening earth. To the hundreds of students filtering through the grand iron gates, it felt as though the world had suddenly awakened from a long, terrifying nightmare, stepped into a fresh reality filled with warmth, light, and beautiful new beginnings. The long winter was officially over, and the tomorrow that had been denied to the timeline for 3 long years had finally arrived. Iris woke up in her residential room at exactly 7 o'clock in the morning, her body instantly sitting upright as a strange, shocking sensation rippled through her entire nervous system. The deep, heavy restriction that had weighed down her chest for the past 99 days was completely gone, replaced by a sudden, light clarity that made every breath feel effortless. She sat on the edge of her bed, her green eyes wide as she looked out the window at the brilliant golden sunshine pouring over the campus lawns. She looked down at the small silver ring on her right index finger, her fingers trembling slightly with an unexplainable, profound emotion that she simply could not identify. For the past 3 months, her life had been defined by a quiet, protective bubble of academic routine, insulated by a deep, dark root of hatred for the strange, white-haired boy who had twice weaponized her survival just to insult her existence. But as she stood up and walked toward her mirror, that hatred felt incredibly distant, like a faded charcoal sketch fading away in the bright morning light. She dressed quickly, slinging her leather bag over her shoulder as she walked down the stone stairs of the residential hall and stepped out into the vibrant courtyard. The campus was bustling with an unusual, celebratory energy, the students laughing and talking loudly as they packed their bags for the upcoming winter break. The central pathway, which had been completely pulverized by the massive high-pressure steam explosion the previous evening, was already cordoned off by maintenance crews, the heavy iron gate replaced and the stones neatly aligned. Iris walked down the path, her boots stepping over the damp concrete, her gaze automatically turning toward the grand humanities archway across the lawn. A crowd of students had gathered near the entrance of the wing, their voices dropping into quiet, somber whispers that contrasted sharply with the cheerful atmosphere of the morning. Iris slowed her pace, an abrupt, freezing dread seizing her chest as she closed the distance. She caught the fragmented sentences of the students standing near the stone pillars. They were talking about an unidentified senior student who had been found by the campus security guards during the early hours of the morning. They said he had been found sitting alone in the deep corner of the archway, his back pressed against the brick pillar, his body completely frozen and lifeless in the shadows. The medical teams had stated that his heart had simply stopped beating due to a catastrophic, rapid failure of his internal organs, a quiet, solitary passing that had left absolutely no signs of struggle or violence. The whispers spoke of his white hair, his dark coat, and the absolute, unyielding silence that had surrounded his final moments on Earth. The description hit Iris with the force of a physical blow to the solar plexus, causing her to stagger backward as the world around her began to spin in a chaotic blur of dark static. Her portfolio slipped from her fingers, the art drawings scattering across the damp stone floor as she ran directly toward the humanities archway, completely ignoring the shouting of the maintenance crews and the confused glares of her classmates. Her heart was hammering against her ribs with a terrifying, suffocating velocity, a sudden, primal panic completely overwhelming her mind. She pushed through the crowded line, stepping into the cool, shadow-drenched alcove where she had stood just 14 hours before. The police and medical teams had long since departed, leaving the dark corner completely empty, save for a faint, dark crimson stain that had dried into the porous surface of the stone floor near the base of the central brick pillar. Iris stood before the spot, her hands clutched tightly against her chest, her green eyes staring blankly at the dark stain on the floor. The air inside the archway felt heavy, charged with a strange, electrical resonance that made the hairs on her arms stand up. She took a slow, hesitant step forward, her boot touching the edge of the alcove, and the moment her physical form occupied the exact space where Leo had drawn his last breath, a cataclysmic shift occurred within the deepest architecture of her consciousness. The absolute completion of the 100th day had officially broken the cosmic loop, and with the permanent destruction of the curse, the invisible mental barriers that had suppressed her memories for 10 lifetimes collapsed entirely into dust. A massive, unstoppable tidal wave of foreign memories erupted within her brain, shattering her reality into 1,000 shimmering pieces. The images flashed behind her retinas with a terrifying, blinding speed. She saw the first timeline, sitting beneath the brilliant pink cherry blossoms, holding a boy's warm hand as they laughed together near the grand fountain. She saw the second timeline, the terrifying roar of the steam explosion, and the exact moment she had died inside his arms while he screamed into the pouring rain. She saw the third timeline, the fourth timeline, and the fifth, remembering the absolute warmth of his smile, the deep, unconditional safety of his presence, and the hundreds of quiet hours they had spent hidden away in the history aisles of the university library. She remembered everything. The complete, unadulterated truth of her existence crashed down upon her spirit with the weight of an entire universe. She saw the library alcove clearly now, remembering the venomous, cruel words he had spat at her across the table. But this time, she saw through the mask. She saw the premature white streaks at his temples, the dark blindness creeping into his eye, and the massive pool of dark crimson blood he had hidden beneath the open architectural textbook just to drive her away. She saw the intersection, remembering the way he had violently thrown her onto the grass to shield her from the runaway truck, and she saw the forest path, where he had broken his own body to drag her away from the falling timber. Every single insult, every single cold sneer, and every single act of malicious cruelty had been a calculated, agonizing armor designed to plant a deep root of hatred in her heart. He hadn't despised her. He had loved her enough to become her absolute monster, deliberately enduring the slow, terrifying decay of his own body and soul in the absolute shadows of isolation, just to ensure her heart could continue to beat today. Iris fell to her knees onto the cold stone floor of the archway, her hands clutching her head as a low, broken sob escaped her throat, a sound of pure, unadulterated grief that resonated through the quiet corridor. The tears poured uncontrollably from her green eyes, tracing hot, shimmering paths down her pale cheeks before splashing onto the dark dried stain where he had died entirely alone in the freezing night. She wrapped her arms around her torso, her body rocking back and forth in the dirt as the unimaginable torture he had endured for her sake completely crushed her spirit. He had died believing she hated him. He had closed his eyes in the absolute darkness, surrounded by nothing but her revulsion and the cold wind of a dying timeline, completely forgotten and utterly reviled by the only person he had lived to save. "Leo!" Iris screamed into the empty alcove, her voice breaking with a devastating sorrow that echoed against the high Gothic ceilings of the Humanities building. "Leo, I remember. I am sorry. Please come back. I am so sorry I hated you. Please don't leave me alone in this tomorrow." Her frantic, crying voice was swallowed by the quiet morning, offering absolutely no response from the empty air. She wept openly for what felt like hours, her forehead pressed against the cold stone, her fingers clawing at the dust as she despaired over the absolute finality of his absence. The world he had bought for her was beautiful, bright, and completely safe, but it was a world that contained absolutely no trace of his existence. He had successfully erased his name from the record of her life, leaving her to walk through the gates of the future as a solitary survivor of an unwritten history. As her trembling right hand brushed against the base of the brick pillar, her fingers accidentally struck a loose, shifting section of stone near the floorboards. She paused, her breath catching in her throat as she slowly reached into the small, dark crevice hidden beneath the mortar. Her fingers wrapped around a cold, heavy object, and she carefully pulled it out into the bright morning light. Resting within her palm was the heavy brass frame of the chronogrip relic. The ancient device was completely dead now, its intricate mechanical gears locked into place, its silver runes entirely dark and spent, devoid of any temporal energy. But tucked neatly beneath the brass casing was a small, tightly folded piece of white paper, completely untouched by the ash of his apartment fire. Iris opened the paper with trembling, clumsy fingers, her tears blurring the shaky, uneven handwriting that Leo had carefully scrawled using his remaining right hand during his final hours on Earth. "If you are reading this note, Iris," the letter began, the words carrying that exact gentle, warm melody that she had missed for 10 lifetimes. "Then it means that the 100th day has officially passed, the winter has ended, and the tomorrow I bled for has finally arrived. It means that your thread of life is officially safe, and that the universe can no longer steal your heart from this world. I know that the suppression has broken, and I know that you are likely crying in the dark corner where I left you. Please, my beautiful girl, dry your tears and do not look at this spot with sorrow. The villain's mask was the easiest weight I have ever had to carry, because every single cruel word I spoke to you was a shield that guaranteed your next breath. I did not die in the shadows, Iris. I lived every single second of these 100 days in the warmth of your survival. I traded your affection for your future, a bargain I would gladly make 1,000 times over through 1,000,000 frozen lifetimes. Do not mourn the monster who drove you away. Take your art, take your beautiful laughter, and live a long, radiantly happy life in the world we bought together. Walk through the sunshine for me, breathe the fresh spring air for me, and remember that somewhere in the unwritten history of this universe, A boy named Leo loved you enough to let you forget his face. Goodbye, my anchor. Your tomorrow has finally begun. Iris held the small piece of paper tightly against her chest, her body shaking with a violent mixture of profound heartbreak and absolute, beautiful healing. She closed her green eyes, allowing the final, ghostly echoes of the 10 timelines to settle peacefully within the sanctuary of her soul. The absolute void of his physical absence would remain a permanent scar across her life, a quiet sorrow that she would carry until her very last breath. But the reality of her survival was his eternal monument, a beautiful, living proof of a love that had successfully conquered the absolute laws of time and fate. She stood up slowly from the cold stone floor, using her sleeve to wipe the remaining tears from her pale cheeks. She gathered her scattered art drawings from the pathway, organizing them neatly inside her portfolio, before stepping out from the shadow of the humanities archway and into the brilliant, golden sunshine of the courtyard. She raised her head, her bright green eyes focusing on the clear blue sky above, her chest expanding as she drew a long, deep breath of the fresh spring air. The loop was permanently broken. The winter had vanished into history, and though the boy who saved her was gone from the physical world, he would live forever, safe, cherished, and unconditionally loved within the unbroken memories of the tomorrow he had died to give her.